All right. Well, hello to you as well. We'd like to call the Bloomfield Hills Board of Education meeting for June 22nd, 2023 to order. Secretary, can you take attendance?
All board members are present with the exception of Trustee Noble.
Can you please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance? Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We'd like to move on to item 2A, recognition of the 2022-23 board interns and student advisory council members. We'll have Trustee Colon.
So as everyone knows, student voice is very, very important to the board, the district, and the community. And tonight we wanted to recognize this year as we close this year's board intern advisory council and move on to next year. And recognize the service of our Board Interns Advisory Council for the year that they did, representing our students, being involved in board policy and everything you've done. So when I call your name, if you're not here, we'll get the recognition certificate to you. But when I call your name, if you're here, can you please come up? Fiona Rudy. And the other board intern, Daya Ramesh, here. Advisory Council, and returning this year as well, Sydney Butler. Eileen C. Henry Jackson. Stephen Mackay, Nisha Singh, and Natalie Simone. Thank you very much, and again, on behalf of the district and community, thanks for your service. This, as we know, last year and even this year, very, very competitive process. Thank you for everything you've done for the students, for the community, and the board. So. Right now, we'll take a couple of minutes. If all of my colleagues will come up, we'll take a picture with our departing interns and advisory council.
Paul, do you, let's give them their certificates here.
Okay, so thank you for that, Trustee Colon. We're going to continue on to item 2B, celebrating success. Our President's Gold Volunteer Service Award. We have Jason Orth, our Bloomfield Hills High School Associate Principal. Hi, Jason.
Raina, could I have you come up? Right there, thanks. I am honored to stand before you today to celebrate Raina Nandalar and Talia Reddy. Though Talia could not be here this evening, as they have earned the President's Gold Volunteer Service Award for the completion of 226 and 250 hours of community service, respectively. The award was presented by the AmeriCorps Corporation in recognition and appreciation for their commitment to strengthening our nation and community through volunteer service. Raina volunteered as a camp counselor in training at Roper Summer Day Camp. This opportunity helped her gain many new leadership skills like problem solving, project management, relationship building, and more. Talia volunteered with Kids Kicking Cancer, where she taught free martial arts classes for kids with chronic illnesses, both virtually and in person twice a week. There is also focus on teaching them the power of breathing to combat the pain and fear they face in their journey. She has volunteered to help many kids kicking cancer events and help them reach their fundraising goals. Congratulations to Raina and Talia for their commitment to making our community a better place. Congratulations. If I could invite the board to take a picture with Raina, please.
We're going to continue on to 3A under public hearing. Public comment. Public comment is an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. It's not a time for dialogue. And in the interest of time, the Open Meetings Act provides the board may place time limits and allotments for any comments. In addition to making a public comment, you may also email the Board of Education at any time. The comments that contain any profanity, threats, defamatory remarks, or directed at any person not employed by the district or a member of the Board of Education in their official capacity and related to the role of responsibilities for which they are employed or served, or is otherwise exempt from the First Amendment protection, will be excluded from a public comment. If you are speaking on behalf of a group or organization, please verify who you represent. Thank you for your time. You'll have 3 minutes in which to address the Board of Education. And Megan, we'll be keeping our time. Trustee Hill will be keeping our time. Thank you. We'll move on to item number 3B, public hearing and adoption of the FY 2023-23 budget and 2023 tax rates.
Good evening, everyone. So I'd like to present the original budget for this upcoming fiscal year 24, as well as the tax rates that would be applied for the 2023 tax year, which would begin July 1 of 2023 and the December 1st levy. In terms of the property tax millage rates, we're anticipating a slight reduction with the primary residency exemption, and that's based on a forecasted reduction in pupils for this upcoming fall. That will be adjusted with the September levy when the final document is signed. The debt levy remains stable at the 2.75 mils, and the sinking fund levy is at the 0.6976 millage rate. There was no impact of the Headley rollback this year. The general fund accounts for the general education and special education costs of the district, not the center programs, and it's preschool through 12th grade and beyond, including up to the age of 26 for our special education population. The original budget for this upcoming fiscal year, we're anticipating a projected fund balance of $21.7 million in the general fund. We have revenues and transfers in of $110.3 million, expenditures and transfers out of $110.3 million, a slight deficit of $32,281. We are forecasting that we'll end the general fund balance with $21.679 million, or 19.7% of expenditures. Our funding source is primarily our foundation allowance times the number of students. Right now, we're still waiting on the state final budget. For this year, it has not yet been submitted out. As a note, the state budget begins October 1st, unlike our year, which begins July 1st. Our revenue sources are primarily composed of the state share of the foundation allowance in state categoricals. That's 56% of our revenues. The local portion is 35%. That's primarily property taxes, but it also includes interest income, the child care programs, and other local sources. Our inter-district sources is primarily the PA-18 allocation that's passed through Oakland schools. And you'll note that the federal sources at 2%, much reduced with the majority of the COVID funding now being removed. If we look at the breakdown, our foundation allowance equates to approximately 63% of our total revenue in the general fund. And we have the state categorical grants are then another 23%. State categorical grants includes the UAL funding and includes other pass-through funding such as the new 147C2, which is additional retirement pass-through. For our $110 million of expenses, that equates to just about $16 million. Our key revenue assumptions for this upcoming year, knowing that the state budget is not yet approved, our foundation allowance, we're anticipating a $458 per pupil increase, which is what the governor's proposal has within it. We're also expecting our enrollment to decline by 85 students. That's based on the cohorts. We have a larger graduating class going out, smaller classes coming in. That is a much more conservative estimate for us. Expenditures are decreasing in total by about $946,000, primarily related to one budget balancing action item that has been put into place, which was removing the $1 million transfer out from the general fund to the capital equipment fund. At mid-year, as the budget typically does improve because we're very conservative with our estimates, we can then look at restoring that. Expenditures by object, the majority of our costs are staff. And we have $49.2 million in salaries and $43.5 million in fringe benefits. That $43.5 million in fringe benefits includes that upcharge for the UAL funding and the other pass-through, that $16 million that we do not control. And then there's nominal other expenditures, but the majority of our budget is $92.7 million of the 110 is based on people. Our board policy is, included within this presentation. Of note, our policy within the board is to have a fund balance between 15 and 20%. If the future forecast shows us going below 15%, that's the warning trigger for us to really take action. For our original budget, our budgeting highlights, revenues, once again, we decreased our enrollment by 85 students. This is more conservative rather than the prior format that we used to utilize, which was estimating a reduction of 21 students. We believe that we'll stick with the cohorts. We believe that's a closer estimate. All of the non-recurring funding from the state and federal governments have been removed. We've increased the special education funding to 100%, which is also included in the governor's proposal. The foundation allowance, once again, a $450 per pupil increase pursuant to the governor's proposal. And then we have increased our staffing. Everyone moved up a step, and all of our contractual arrangements have been honored with the contracts that are currently in place, and that will cost the general fund approximately $1 million. Other highlights include increasing our benefits by a range of 1% to 3% depending on the type of benefit. The retirement pass-through, once again, it's a little over $16 million. And we have also realized savings from the K-8 restructuring, turnovers in other departments, and other changes that were equated to savings of approximately $1.2 million. The one budget balancing action item is removing the $1 million transfer out to the capital equipment fund, which we typically would use for bus purchases, vehicle replacements, operational equipment, staff technology, and other non-sinking fund eligible equipment. And based on the fall enrollment and projections, this will be considered to be added back as the upcoming year unfolds. You can see that the 5-year forecast going out, the various changes, we have other increases after this first year going out. There's a $200 per pupil conservative increase in the foundation allowance, holding tight with increases on the fringe benefits and the other items. And even in fiscal year 28, we're showing an ending fund balance in the general fund of 17.1%. For the special revenue funds, the special revenue funds are center program, the community rec fund, food service, the Okema Campus IA budget, student activities. We are starting the year with a little over $8 million fund balance. We anticipate revenues and transfers in of $24 million, expenditures and transfers out of $23.7 million, ending with a slight surplus of $352,000, leaving an overall fund balance of $8.4 million in the center, or in the special revenue funds. For the final budget revisions, we have for the general fund, forecasted revenues of $112.8 million, expenditures of $111.3 million, for a surplus of $1.554 million. Some of the increases that we experienced are improvements in the interest income and other non-recurring grants that came in, or other savings that contributed to that $1.5 million. As a gentle reminder, you can see that at mid-year we were showing a surplus of $331,000. And as we started this year, we were projecting a deficit of $401,000. Once again, we're very conservative with our budgeting methodologies. We will end this final budget, we're showing a 19.7% fund balance. For the special revenue funds, started the year with $8.5 million, revenues coming in of $22.9 million, expenditures going out of $23.2 million, a utilization of fund reserves of $380,000. That does include a required spend down in the food service fund for the food service equipment. We've previously discussed that's about $750,000. And it also includes transfer out for special education buses from the center program. Then I have some slides on the revenue and expenditures by fiscal year so that everyone can see what the trends have been, enrollment trends, the fund balance trends, and then just a link to a surplus of information that's available on our website, as well as Munetrics, with a significant amount of historical data. Any questions?
I wanted to make sure you were all set.
Yep.
Superintendent Watson? Okay. Is there any discussion? Any questions?
Okay.
Thank
you very much.
Thank you again, Karen.
Thanks.
Okay. Thank you so much. We're going to move on to item number 4, public comment. And public comment is an opportunity for the public to address the Board of Education. It's not a time for dialogue. In the interest of time, the Open Meetings Act provides the Board of Education may place limits on the time allotments for individual comment. An individual to make a public comment, you may also email the Board of Education at any time. Any comment that contains profanity, threats, defamatory remarks, or is directed at any person not employed by the district or a member of the Board of Education in their official capacity or related to the role and responsibilities for which they are employed or serve, or is otherwise exempt from the First Amendment protection will be excluded from public comment. If you are speaking on behalf of a group or organization, please identify who you represent. Thank you for taking the time to address the Board of Education, and you'll have 3 minutes for your remarks. Trustee Hill will be keeping our time. First, we have Jacob, and it's a Banoui? Say it again? Banouni. I was almost there. My apologies. Jason Banouni.
Ladies and gentlemen of Bloomfield Hills School Board, I would thank you today for giving me the opportunity to address you regarding the future of our beloved robotics program. As an alumnus and a mentor of Hall of Fame Team 2834 and a passionate advocate for STEM education, I stand before you to make a heartfelt plea to preserve the building that has become the heart and soul of our robotics organization. Over the last 3 years, our team has flourished within the walls of this facility, making remarkable impact on the students and the community. The building we currently occupy was generously provided to us during the pandemic in 2020, serving as a sanctuary for our students and a place where they could gather, learn, and collaborate despite the challenges around them. As discussion of a new STEM center for K-12 student surfaces, I understand the allure of a fresh start in the State-of-the-art facility. However, I implore you to consider the invaluable benefits of allowing us to remain in our current building. Our program has become more than just a world-class robotics team. It's a haven for innovation, creativity, and personal growth. The dedication and hard work of the team has earned us prestigious recognition in the form of the First Impact Award. This is the highest honor in global competitive robotics, and it showcases our commitment to community outreach, STEM education, and inspiring the next generation of innovators. Under the roof of this building, we have spearheaded incredible initiatives and achievements. Our team has mentored hundreds of students, equipping them with the skills and confidence to pursue STEM careers. We've forged partnerships with local businesses and organizations, creating internship opportunities and fostering real-world connections for our students. By remaining in our current location, we can continue to nurture these relationships and maximize our impact on the community and our students. Moreover, our robotics program offers an extraordinary opportunity for students even after they graduate from high school. Many of our alumni have gone on to secure high-level engineering and business positions thanks to the experience and expertise gained through our program. By keeping our current building, we ensure the future generations of students will have the same chance to thrive and excel in their chosen fields. Additionally, it's important to note that there's a central portion of the current building we currently do not have access to. Gaining access to this space would provide us with much-needed room for expansion. And with the growing demand for robotics education, including the utilization of the building by numerous outside high schools such as Farmington, Brighton, Pontiac, Notre Dame Prep, and University Liggett School, just to name a few, as well as the addition of 10 middle school teams to the space, it's imperative that we have adequate room to accommodate the growth of our program. By granting us access to the middle section of the building, we could create a dedicated area that would support the needs of our expanding team and ensure the continued success here and in the broader community. In conclusion, I urge you to reflect upon the remarkable journey of FRC Team 2834. The positive impact we have had on our students and our community is immeasurable. Our current building symbolizes achievement.
That's time.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Lawrence Gray.
Good evening. Bloomfield Hills has an amazing school district. You provide so many opportunities for your students. It is not only one of the best and wealthiest in the state, but it is also one of the best and wealthiest in the country. You have the opportunity to make this DHH program the best in the country if you are dedicated and care to do so. We came here tonight to talk to you about the current state of the DHH program. I have an exceptional daughter who has completed 6 years in Bloomfield Hills DHH. In that time, we have noticed a significant overall decline in the DHH program. As parents, we are not privy to all of the details and numbers, but talking with our daughter as well as former and current DHH staff and families, we can see a definite trend. We are aware of at least 8 staff members who left in the past year, many due to an unpleasant work environment and lack of respect. We are aware of at least 8 students who have left the program in the past year. We have been told that in the fall, there will be 35 DHH students. Yet 15 years ago, there were 145 students. The DHH program is disappearing, and my daughter's education is at risk. We are here to ask all of you a few questions. Number 1, are you willing to make our DHH program a priority? We as parents get the impression that the program is actively being dismantled. Parents are having to move out of state or drive their child to Flint to find other options. 2, we would like to know what is being done to replace the staff you have lost with qualified, certified DHH staff. My daughter went most of this year without an occupational therapist, then had an occupational therapist who didn't know sign language. And now you have many more positions to fill. Several, you didn't even require them to know American Sign Language according to the job descriptions you posted. How can a counselor have a private conversation with a deaf student if they don't know sign language? Are you actively going to Gallaudet and other institutions who specialize in deaf ed to recruit qualified DHH staff? And third, what are you planning to change in your administration to show your staff and families that they are valued so you can retain those you still have? You can't afford to lose any more if it is that challenging to replace them. Very few places in the U.S. do what you do. Please commit to working toward making this the best
That's time.
program. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Jacob Welch.
Hello, my name is Jacob Welch, for those of you who don't know me. I'm a rising senior on Team 2834, the Bionic Blackhawks, our high school robotics team here in Bloomfield Hills Schools. I want to touch on some of the things that my colleague Jacob Benuni was talking about earlier. For those of you who don't know that much about our team, like he said, we're a Hall of Fame team, a world-class robotics team, one of only 33 since the beginning of first competition in 1992. We have reached a very, very high level over our 15 years as a team, and we want to continue to push our boundaries. We want to expand our team and expand our robotics program. Our program across the district continues to grow. Currently, it consists of over 200 students in grades K through 12. FIRST Robotics encompasses all grades up through the high school level, and we want to be able to provide the adequate education and space for students of all grade levels in robotics. To do this, we're very thankful for the building that we currently operate out of. It has been wonderful to have that. It provides the space that we as a high school team need to build a full-size practice field, to run our robotics shop out of, and we are able to host other teams from around the surrounding area, including other Hall of Fame teams who we have built up a statewide reputation with. We are hoping to expand, as Jacob Benuni said, to the middle section of that building. That would give us space to host middle school teams in the FTC level, as many as 14 teams, which need adequate space for their fields. We're also looking to centralize the elementary school level robotics teams who are currently practicing out of people's homes. I've seen teams that set up their tables. It's 4 by 8 feet wide tables that don't really have a space outside of many people's basements where their teams meet to practice. If we can put those in a centralized location, somewhere in our shop, somewhere in a different building, something like that, then we would be able to bring more people into the program and provide them with a better foundation. Our team is currently entirely run by parent volunteers and students. We do not have a space within an individual school, and we draw from schools across the entire district. And we sincerely hope that you as a board will reach out to us with any concerns over where we can be housed. If we're going to be moved to a new space, we're hoping that we would have some input as to the needs, certain electrical, structural, space concerns that would need to be addressed if we were to move to any new space. Additionally, location-wise, since we do draw from students across the entire district, we would hope to be somewhere central. Our current location is on Franklin, up in the northern part of the city, but still relatively in the center, which is quite convenient for where our students are.
It's time.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. I'm going to move on to item number 6, Superintendent's Report. Superintendent Watson.
Thank you, Dr. Southwood. Just a couple things. As we know, Bloomfield Hills Schools, we celebrated our graduating class of 2023. That included students from Bloomfield Hills High School, the International Academy, Bowers Academy, Wing Lake Development Center, and our prep program. So congratulations to all of our graduates. For our students at Bloomfield Hills High School, we had 85 seniors who scored a 13 or above on the SAT. And we have 48 graduating seniors who had a GPA of 4.0 or above. Looking at some of the next steps, we have students that are going on to work, students that are taking a gap year, students that are going on to the military. The majority are going on to four-year colleges. Included in that, we have 87 Blackhawks that will be continued on to become Spartans at Michigan State University. And we have 68 that will be becoming Wolverines and attending the University of Michigan. And we have our other graduates that are going to universities, not just throughout the United States, but Canada, internationally as well. So again, congratulations to all of our graduates in the class of 2023. Turn back to you, Dr. Southward.
Thank you so much for that. Yes, congratulations to all of our graduates. I am going to move on to item number 7, which is the board report. Oh, did I skip something? Oh, come back. All right, so wanted to also recognize all of our rising ninth graders, as we've had several ceremonies to celebrate them. And this past, what was yesterday? Wednesday, I attended the Oakland County School Board Association Awards Banquet, where 2 of our former board members were acknowledged and recognized, and they received certificates of distinction. Was Jennifer Matlow. So Dr. Matlow, thank you for your service. And certificate of achievement for Lisa Efros. Also, thank you for your service. We'll be sure to send you this information to you in the mail, so you'll have that soon. As I was moving very quickly, I skipped 5, so we're going to go back up to item number 5, which is board business. Is there a motion?
Sure. I move the Board of Education to approve the resolution calling for a special school election on November 7th, 2023, at which Bloomfield Hills Schools voters will be asked to renew the current district's sinking fund millage with a 3-year millage at the same rate levied in 2018, which is 0.7165 mils.
Second. It's been properly moved and seconded. Discussion?
I'm satisfied with the discussion we had at the...
Actually, the rate will be at this year's rate, which is 0.6976. I need to interject, but I want the motion to read properly.
Thank you. We will update the motion, and yes, can you read the motion as with the changes?
I think we have to do an amendment.
Yes, making a motion.
I'd like to make a motion to amend the sinking fund millage rate from 0.7165 mils as shown to 0.6976 mils.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion on the amendment?
No, I was just going to say I'm satisfied with the discussion we had at the last study session, personally.
So we're going to close we're going to vote on the amendment. All those in favor of the amendment?
Aye.
The amendment passes 6-0. And then go back to the discussion of the sinking fund, the proposal. So discussion is, any discussion?
Not on that. Nope.
Okay. Closing discussion on item 6A with a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. It passes 6-0. Is there another motion?
President Southward, I have an item to add as 5B, a motion which would be, I move that the Board of Education fully release the executive summary of the investigative report from Gianmarco, Mullins, and Horton by removing the FOIA requirement, publishing the report in an accessible location on the district website or board page, and providing communication for the community at large on how to access the report.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
The motion has been seconded. We'll move into discussion. Any discussion?
Yeah, the point is we worked very quickly. I think we had the closed session prior to the study session where we discussed this and had to move really hastily. But I think going further than making people request a FOIA is taking the right step to be transparent and open and giving people access to the report. There's no need to have that as a hurdle. So my objective is making sure that it's as accessible as possible for the community. We've done our due diligence, and we owe that to them. So that's the point of the motion.
Any other discussion? Trustee
My
Hill?
recollection is we made the decision based on past precedent of how we release materials to the community that the board has. So it has been made public via a FOIA request. I have not heard any circumstances in this situation which would create a deviation from that protocol. So if there wasn't any past precedent of how we did things, I would say, sure, let's release it and immediately. But because of past precedent of how the board has made decisions to release items like this, I don't see any extraordinary circumstances here that should deviate from that. Because there's plenty of other materials that, for people who weren't directly affected by this, there's another issue that they might see within the district that they think affects them, and they had to go through a FOIA to get something. So if we make an exception here, what is our threshold for exceptions, and where do we start and end with them? So I know that the report is floating out within the community. I know a lot of people are passing it around who have obtained it. As far as I know, Mr. McDonald has responded to all FOIA requests timely. I haven't heard any complaints about the cost of them. So I just don't see any, I don't want to set a precedent that when people complain enough about the board setting a precedent of requesting a FOIA, that we respond. We as a board require people to submit the FOIA request. Unless I hear some extraordinary deviating circumstance around that, I don't see a reason to deviate from that precedent.
Other discussion?
I mean, I would say this was, I understand what you're saying in terms of setting a precedent, and certainly we don't want any FOIA request to just be, well, if a couple people say we want it, then we should just release everything. But I think this, this was different in that this was our investigation that we led, and that we promised to the community that we were going to do our due diligence to ensure that this wasn't something that we just had the perception of we're going through another issue and don't worry about it. We're going to go through our due diligence to make sure that we're making the right decisions. And at the end of this, we understand what took place, and if there's any recommendations from that report, that those get passed along. So because the onus was on us really to go through this process, I do feel like we owe it to the community. It's ours to own, and in my opinion, it is something that I want to give to them. I get it, it's out there, it's floating. I think we should have, thinking back on it, if there was enough time, I probably would have come to the same conclusion I am at now, which is we should have just released it and not made it a FOIA request, and I probably would have gone through that same line of thought. But that's where I end up now. I think it's the right thing to do. I get it. I understand that's not how we've done it, but I do think this is an extraordinary circumstance. It's probably different than most situations.
I don't see it as an extraordinary circumstance. And I think that we had the option as a board to uphold our attorney-client privilege, and we didn't have to release it at all. And we made the decision to release it, and we did it via the mechanism that we do in any other circumstance. So I just don't see any reason to deviate from that standard.
Trustee Colin, you have any comments?
I guess what Trustee Hill, I guess the point is, I don't see this in the past as any precedent that we've done, that we're following. So I agree with Tarek that I don't see any reason why we wouldn't just release it.
But we did release it. That's the distinction. We did release it. We had an option and a choice not to release it under attorney-client privilege. We opted to waive that attorney-client privilege and release it in a mechanism, in a forum, in a way that most public entities release this type of information. That's my point. We did release it, and we had a choice not to.
Trustee Kumar?
I tend to agree with Trustee Hill.
Trustee Graham Beveritt? I'll go let you sit there. I think that I would stand on our original decision, and at this moment, given that it would change, to your point, Megan, how things are requested, I think that perhaps maybe if at that point in time we had not agreed to make the document where you had to FOIA the request is different than going back to change it and now saying it's a FOIA. But I do understand what you're saying. At this time, that's kind of where I'm falling.
For me, I wish you would have made this argument 2 weeks ago or whenever it was. I tend to agree with you only because I don't think that there are situations where there are investigations done by a law firm. anticipate future investigations. I don't know how many there have been done in the past, and so I don't know that the precedent argument holds weight with regard to that specific situation. But I do agree that it does hold weight regarding our normal release of information that's not readily available on the website, right? So at this point, there have already been people that have had to FOIA it. So I don't know that that's a good argument for not releasing it. But I guess I lean towards your argument that we should release it because it's already floating out there. If we put out the document, it's undoctored by anyone. That there's like a spot where the original document is available, so like no one can change it and send it around. So I guess I do agree with you that why don't we just put it somewhere, Or I mean, at a minimum, have it available here, for anyone to come look at. So
I don't think there's a cost. Is there a cost?
There's been no charge, just so everyone understands the process. Someone would need to send an email saying, basically, send me this document, and then it would get sent to them.
And they've received it.
Correct.
Yeah,
Keith
so
has
I
sent
don't see
everyone,
what the
but
issue
there will
is.
be no charge based on a FOIA for this document.
So I haven't heard complaints of not receiving a timely response or being too expensive. So people have access to it. Sounds like it's just a couple more steps than maybe a suggestion of putting it on the website for someone to click. I think it's a distraction. I think I respect everybody who's concerned about this issue. It was a big issue that deserved the attention it had, but there's a lot of other issues that are more important to other people regarding other things in this district. This can't be the singular focus. And I think by deviating from, maybe we don't routinely have, legal investigations, but there are other reports that the district has and puts out there. I just don't see a reason to deviate from that.
Yeah, I think if we had not, to my original point, if we had not decided that in the beginning and through the advice that we had received, that's the route in which we decided to take. And I kind of, to John's point and to my original point, if we had have had this conversation, I think before we had gotten to the point where we decided this is what we were going to do with the 4-year request, had we just said we were going to go through a different route, I think once we've decided we're going to have something 4-year and we require that of the public, I think that's where I'm at.
I think going back to the discussion, I thought I'm sorry. Were you done?
Oh, sorry. Yes, I'm done.
No,
now.
I'm sorry.
You may go.
I'm sorry. I was just thinking about our discussion. It was more about, I don't think it was about the FOIA. When I recall, it was more about waiving attorney-client privilege. And I tend to agree with Tarek. I don't think I was focused on whether it was how people would get it via a FOIA request or putting up there. And if there is no charge, what is the difference of just putting it on, from a transparency point of view, just putting it on our website?
Exactly. What is the difference? So why do we need to change what we did
Because it's more
previously?
transparent to just put
It's
it out there.
not more transparent.
Okay.
The information still exists. Transparency would be an argument if we decided not to release it and retain our attorney-client privilege. It's just a mechanism of how they obtain it, that it's still transparent.
Okay, I could disagree. We could agree to disagree on
Of
that.
course.
where are we putting it, I guess? How about that where's it going to go?
Somewhere on the website.
What does that mean, though? You know what I mean?
On the board website, if you go on the board page, is a link to access the report and then send out an email to say this has been made accessible. You can click here to go and view it.
Okay, I mean, I get that, but where, like on the front page of the board? So every time you click on the board from now until when? You know what I mean? Where, that's an important distinction.
I get it.
You know?
I don't have all the point of this is I think we should be a little bit more proactive. After that got done and I started thinking about it, I thought, in my opinion, we should have been a little bit more proactive in doing more other than just saying we removed the ACP and we're done with it. In my opinion, we should have done more, but we had to wait another 2 weeks until we could sit here at the board table and talk about it. So 2 weeks have passed. I get it. It's been out there. But I think putting it on the website, it doesn't need to stay there forever and always. But this is still a situation that some people are looking for closure on. And maybe they didn't know that they could go out and ask for a FOIA. I just think that it doesn't do harm to make it available. and it might give closure to people who are still curious that haven't received the document. I just think in the interest of doing our due diligence, doing our best to be transparent, that's the step in the right direction, as opposed to just saying we took away the attorney-client privilege and walking away.
I think it does cause harm, because in the future, when someone else has an issue or some information that they want readily accessible on our website versus having to go through a FOIA request, and they come to public comment and they say, why was that an exception, but my circumstance isn't? And it might be something that was equally important to that person or that group of individuals. So I think that's the harm we run I've said enough.
I think it's just, is it available? Is it not available? Are we being transparent? Are we not being transparent? And I think it's through the lens in which each individually we see it. And some of us agree that it's not being transparent, and some of us agree that there is transparency because the document is available upon request. And if you would like the document, should we decide to vote one way or the other, you can obtain the document by emailing our assistant superintendent. So at least from what I'm hearing, if we're talking about the document being accessible, it is accessible through email.
Want to call a vote?
I don't have a problem putting it on the website. I just don't know. I know we're redoing the website, I believe, perhaps this summer.
That work has been ongoing.
Right, so maybe it will be locatable, if that's a word, on the website after that. But right now, a lot of things are difficult to find on the website, and is that transparent when someone's looking for it and they can't find it? You know what I mean?
Probably a lot easier to just submit a FOIA request and put it at the website.
Because I don't think it needs a prominent space forever and always, and then when we move it from that prominent space, then what's the argument? You know what I mean?
I think
right.
I'm trying to get it somewhere and then send out a communication and say, our report was completed. In case someone wasn't watching the study session and didn't hear about it, they understand that we did what we said we were going to do, and here's the output of that. Because I mean, that's the step of going and making sure we're doing our due diligence to be transparent. So that's my only point. But that's.
I agree with you. And in the part of should have made this available in our original conversation. And so I think if we had not agreed that this was something we wanted to FOIA, then I think that it would have been easier for me to say one way or the other. Going back to if we had other situations where people have asked us to waive that, and we have said no. So I just think that to remove it would be setting something that I don't necessarily we can't come back from. At least my own opinion.
I mean, my final argument is that it's distinctly different from other situations. So I think you can make a decision a decision on this particular item and separate it from any other requests, FOIA requests.
I guess in this case, I agree to disagree with you on this one. But is there any other discussion?
You could also get into a discussion on how long you keep it on the website.
I know.
10 years, 20 years? Is it relevant after 2? Is it relevant after 5? I mean, every one of us could have a different opinion on it. It is accessible. We're debating it in a public forum right now. It is accessible to those who wish to request access.
You have a copy. You can, if the person contacts you and you feel like they need the copy, you can always give them your copy.
Continue to keep it accessible under FOIA.
Okay, we can vote on the motion, I suppose.
I think this is important, but I don't want to speculate that this is what equally important to all of our residents and all of the members of Bloomfield Hills Schools. There are a lot of parents and students in our district who don't even know that this happened. And they might have another issue, something that happened with them that affects their child, their student, or a taxpayer, something else that they find to be even more important. And they say, well, why was that situation an exception? So my position here isn't saying this isn't important. It's saying we deal with a lot of important issues. Importance is something relative to a particular person and group of people. And saying that this is the most compared to other people's issues. I just don't think it's fair.
Okay, so any other discussion? Very, very good discussion. So we'll have to call for a vote. And in this case, all those in favor?
Sorry, could you read the motion? Sorry.
Oh, sorry, can you reread the motion for us?
I move the Board of Education fully release the executive summary of the investigative report from Gianmarco, Mullins, and Horton by removing the FOIA requirement and publishing the report in an accessible location, such as the district website, and providing communication for the community at large on how to access the report.
Perhaps, I know we already moved to a close. I don't know, maybe the communication part could still be done? And how to access the report?
I don't know how to transition from that.
Well, I guess now that I've listened to that part, I mean, what is we've already,
Sorry,
I feel like
read it
we're
again and
reopening,
pull that up. Sorry.
like by sending the communication, like who does the communication go to? The
Okay. I
full
just wanted to make sure we
20,000,
heard
you know,
everything.
to the entire community, to the school community?
I mean, we sent out information when the incident happened, right?
Right.
To the community. And I mean, that would make sense to me that you would send out communication to the community saying, here's closure.
Here's the report. Okay.
But that's
I'm ready to
was
vote.
the essence of that, yeah.
Okay, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, I need a roll call vote. Sorry, I apologize. And we do have to have 4 in favor. Is that correct, Rebecca? Okay. Trustee Fowler?
Aye.
Trustee Hill? Aye, yes or no?
Yes.
Aye is yes, duh. Trustee Hill?
No.
Trustee Van Gemeren?
Yes.
Trustee Cooper?
No.
Trustee Kohler?
Yes.
And I am a no, so it does not pass. Okay, moving on to item number 8, which is superintendent search update. The position right now is still open, and per our timeline, the position will remain open until July 7th. Following that week of July 10th, we will begin looking at all candidates and preparing for our first round of interviews. Any questions? Thank you. Moving up to
Actually, I do one. When is it close again for our community?
July 7th.
July 7th? Okay.
Yes. And then that following week, July 10th, is when we will start looking at candidates. Thank you for that. Moving on to item 9, the healing and response plan. Superintendent Watson.
Thank you, Dr. Southward. Couple updates. One, since the last time we met, there were no additional hate incident reports that have been turned in. A couple other details, just a reminder of some of the steps we took from late March through the end of this year, and also touch upon what the fall of 2023 and some of the summer work will look like. We provided resources to staff on identifying anti-Semitism and Islamophobia. On April 21st, we had a speaker on anti-Semitism for all BHHS staff. On April 26th, we had a speaker on Islamophobia for all BHHS staff. The administration has continued to work with the teachers to identify authentic opportunities within the course curriculum to participate in civil discourse and productive debate. Teachers have worked with their departments to identify potential resources, activities, and field trips that will support our course curriculum. We've identified opportunities to further cultivate faculty global perspectives with curriculum-specific training regarding the facilitation of complex topics. We had held initial conversations with the Holocaust Memorial Center and how to use their resources and connections, along with other local museums, including the Arab American Museum and the Charles H. Wright African American Museum. We've agreed to pilot a high school version of Religious Diversity Journeys. This will be for 100 students representing BHHS, IA, and Bowers for the 23-24 school year. And we have several staff members and teachers who volunteered to work with the Interfaith Council to consult on a high school religious diversity journey extension program. Some of the ongoing work for the summer and fall of 2023 will further identify and review research-based approaches to further develop a positive school culture and climate. There's been a trip planned for Washington, D.C. for June of 2024 for interested 11th grade students. This is designed for high school students and is offered this year only for those that experienced the canceled 8th grade trip due to COVID. We continue with the process of finalizing and inviting students to attend a communication camp in the fall. Camp Communication is a comprehensive program focused on civil discourse and critical dialogue, facilitated by trained BHHS faculty. So far, we have secured the dates for staff training in September and the camp dates in November. Also, we're setting up planning meetings over the summer to discuss the timeline and process for identifying and inviting the students that will be going to the communication camp. It's kind of a high-level overview of where we've been and then where we're going summer and fall as we move forward. Thank you, Dr. Southworth.
You're welcome. We'll move on to item number 10, consent agenda. Trustee Van Gimmeren.
Move that the Board of Education approve the recommendations detailed in the consent agenda as follows. Request to approve amended minutes from the study session of April 13, 2023. Request to approve the minutes from the regular meeting of May 25, 2023. I move that the Board of Education approve the financial reports as presented by Karen Hildebrand, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. I move that the Board of Education approve the disbursement reports as presented by Karen Hildebrand, Assistant Superintendent for Finance and Operations. I move that the Board of Education approve the personnel actions as presented by Keith McDonald, Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources. I move that the Board of Education approve the organizational membership with the Metro Bureau in the amount of $2,891.50 for the 2023-24 school year as presented by Superintendent Watson. I move that the Board of Education approve membership in the Michigan High School Athletic Association for the 2023-24 school year as presented by Mike Cowdrey, Director of Athletics and Recreation. I move that the Board of Education approve membership in the Michigan Association of School Boards for the 2023-24 school year in the amount of $8,965.99 as presented by Superintendent Watson. And lastly, I move the Board of Education designate Patrick Sidge, Administrator of Public Safety, as Bloomfield Hills Schools appointed school safety liaison to work with the Michigan School Safety Commission as required annually by Public Act 549, parenthetical MCL 380.1241, unparenthetical for the 2023-24 school year as presented by Superintendent Watson.
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion?
I have one question. I should have asked it before. The Metro Bureau, what does that do for the district exactly?
Provides professional development opportunities for administrators.
Okay. So like training,
Correct.
things like, okay. And then I saw something that they're partnered with MLI. And that they do like superintendent searches in partnership with them. I thought something about a discounted rate or something in there that said maybe, I didn't know if we got that passed on as being members of Metro Bureau, that maybe something to check out. But I noticed that in the document that they're partnered with them and that there's savings through that search process. So something to consider.
I wouldn't be able to speak on what partnership.
I just saw it in there, yeah.
No, but you are doing the search with them for your principals, correct?
We're doing that through MLI, sorry.
Isn't that what you said?
That's what I'm saying.
That's what he
so they
said.
partner with MLI to do searches, and there's some kind of like cost savings in there. It was
Through Metro
just,
Bureau?
yeah.
Yeah,
In
not
that
familiar
document
with
that
it.
was in the agenda, it says there's a partnership with MLI. So I thought that was interesting to at least maybe for someone to look into at some point. That maybe there's some kind of savings there because we're a member of that Metro Bureau.
I'll
Or paying
double check,
something.
yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
On I, what does the roughly $9,000 that we pay to the MASB, what is that, what do we get for that?
Our memberships,
And what does that entail?
access to education. Go ahead.
Our training materials?
Yeah.
There's a write-off in the summary large part of it would be legal fees, legal services by Brad, and other free professional development trainings offered.
Got it. Thank you.
Per pupil membership.
Got it.
Thank you for that. Other discussion? Okay, call a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? 6-0. Special report. We have our bond quarterly report, item number 11. We welcome Paul Wills, our owner's rep from Platte Moran Cressa.
Yes, good evening, everybody. And along with me this evening is Mr. Alan Dresselhaus, principal with Platte Moran Cressa. And so really, there's 3 parts to tonight's presentation. The first one is just a reminder of what the bond really was in terms of educational improvements, community improvements, critical infrastructure, safety, security, ADA. If you recall back to the 2020, there was 6 major projects to really get you a K-5, 6, 8, 9, 12 by the fall of 23. We're here to proudly announce that we're well on our way by this fall to have the 2 middle schools up and running. For those who have been there in the last few weeks or months, it's just amazing what's been taking place over the last 2.5 years of planning. And then also at the elementary schools, really getting these K-5s, predominantly the kindergarten spaces ready for the fall going forward. So in the presentation, we're going to turn over to Alan here shortly to talk about those projects that are in place. Then I'll wrap up with some of the financial reconciliations that we did at the June 8th workshop. And also just give a look ahead of kind of what are those things that we're looking at for the next year and a half of planning and procedures going forward. With that, I'll turn over to Alan.
Great. Thanks, Paul. Good evening, Board. Good to see you again. Since our last quarterly report, we were in 4 of the district properties working. I'm happy to report now we're in 7, starting new construction activity. So we are moving along quite nicely. Oops. Starting with our largest project, which is the middle school at North Hills. You can see that the concrete and asphalt are now being placed and poured into the parking lots. The pool tile installation is going on in the center picture there. Painting and new flooring continues throughout the hallways. We have new furniture and fixtures currently on site and being erected for delivery to the new classrooms. We have final cleaning efforts are underway so that we can begin starting to look at doing a punch list and obtain our final C of O. And we are hopeful that the teachers hopefully will begin to gain access into the spaces around mid-August. Next, we have progress information here at South Hills Middle School. Demolition will begin this week on the current interior building. The media center has already started. The finished carpentry casework continues throughout. The soffits, as you can see, are being constructed and painting that continues in the cafeteria and the new auditorium. Concrete work continues on the site and in the new auditorium. Work has started on the existing corridors where possible. The kitchen electrical, plumbing, and equipment installation is continuing, as you can see in the center photo there. The fire suppression, the corridor, in the corridor and in the band and orchestra rooms is nearing completion. The parking lot curbing is also being poured as we speak. And the sports field in the back is ready to receive the new artificial turf here next week. At Conant, there's been significant activity over the last few months. The demolition is still continuing on the inside in preparation for the fall. Interior doors and frames have been installed. New electrical fixtures are being delivered and installed. The fire lane for construction removal of the fences is starting this week. The front entrances to the roof and the roofing materials has been ordered and ready to be received on site. And cleaning of the building, just final cleanup is currently underway. We're also working with the staff on site with the relocation of the furniture, and the teacher supplies are being moved out this week as well. Moving on to Way, the new front entrance is coming together, and the work is continuing. Demolition inside the current building is ongoing as the interior walls are now coming down. The new ones are going up. Painting and completion is seek to be completed soon. The electrical fixtures, classroom flooring, millwork has all been installed in most of the new classrooms. The exterior asphalt and miscellaneous site work is coming to an end. New landscaping is currently being installed and be ready for the fall. And again, we are working with the staff on site for the furniture and the teacher supplies that are being moved out and relocated as we speak. So one of our newer project activities is at the high school. The athletic fields are now, the demolition has started and the site work has commenced on the baseball and softball fields. The new retaining wall on the baseball's right field is in place and the grading is underway. We are expecting turf to be received on site in October, November, and these fields will be playable and ready for the next high school season in March. Eastover at East Hills, which we'll be referring to Eastover as we move forward. We have the demolition of the interior, as you can see, is commenced and started, and relocation of the existing teachers' furniture and assets and supplies are being packed up and ready for relocation. Lone Pine at West Hills, similar. Painting, framing, electrical and drywall installation is ongoing in the kindergarten rooms. The acoustical ceiling is now being put in place and grid being installed. Casework and flooring is scheduled to be delivered and installed next week. And we'll be in good shape for school start up in the fall. So with that, I'll turn it back to Paul to go through the financials.
Thanks, Alan. And again, that's just a couple snippets of what $141 million of approved work looks like over the last 2.5 years. So again, thank you to the Board of Education, the administrative team, with Pat Watson's leadership, Jake McDermott, Dave Shulkin, Karen Hildebrand, and others that have really helped get these first 6 projects to fruition. So again, huge accomplishment to get to that K5, 6, 8, and 9, 12 configuration. As we shared at the June 8th workshop of the Committee of the Whole, this is a snapshot of our cost financial model of the $200 million that was passed in August. Right now, we're just slightly underneath that at $237,463. And what that's comprised of, again, as I mentioned, about $141,000 of contracts to date. That does include contingencies, which you'll, if you looked in your board report, there's about $2.3 million still left of that approval. About $68.9 million of future projects. What we have currently in place is approximately about $15 million at the 4 existing elementary schools. Also, what we'll be showing in August is also the drawings for the high school wellness center. So again, pulling a lot of these projects up. So as Alan showed you, the pool over at North, the baseball fields, the wellness center, these were all pulled up about a year earlier to try to offset some of that escalation going forward. Transfer about $735,000 from food services. And again, taking a look at some potential infrastructure costs as we go through the next 6 board packets or 6 bid packages, rounds out roughly the $200,037,000. From a contingency allocation, with North Hills and South Hills, again, being predominantly done, obviously North Hills being the biggest with a large renovation, a large addition to that facility, so about 2% of that contingency remains. South Hills about 15%, Conant Way respectively at 37% and 78%. And then East Hills, West Hills, and even in technology, we're doing very well in terms of remaining contingency for that going forward. So some of the projects coming up, again, we have bid packs 6 through 16. Again, playground equipment, the site work was recently approved by the board, so we're really looking at the early childhood renovations over at the current Eastover. Again, so that would be for the fall of 24. Also, you'll take a look at the high school athletics, as Alan mentioned. Again, the fields will be ready for the spring of 24 here coming forward, and then ultimately we're getting into that second phase of the existing Conant Way and East Hills and West Hills facilities to get those completed out correctively. As we mentioned at the June 8th workshop, again, transportation, we're going to come back here in probably about August timeframe with various options for transportation, for physical plant services, other considerations for Lone Pine with the pre-K. So again, we're going to be looking at working with the user groups to make sure we have a full look of that from a pre-K perspective, from a robotics perspective, STEM, et cetera, along with Jake McDermott and transportation. The last several projects, bid packs 14, 15, 16, are really, I'll call it the remainder support educational facilities. This would be Bowers Farm, the Nature Center, and then obviously Booth and some high school interiors, and lastly, the renovations going forward. So you're going to see a lot of Alan and myself and our team here in the next 6 to 8 months, a lot of bid packages, predominantly, again, focusing on the elementary schools, and again, design updates to the Board of Education as it relates to the transportation of Lone Pine as we look holistically at the portfolios. So with that, I'll turn it back over to President Southward and the board for any questions.
Thank you so much. Any discussion? Start with Trustee Cohen.
Yeah, a couple of questions. So one question, I think you mentioned it in the update. So a couple of things that were put on hold. One of the things was the transportation and that discussion. So you said there are going to be some groups that you're going to need to reach out to. One of them was here tonight, public comment. So when will that happen?
Yeah, so actually, we've had French Associates kind of go through and draw what percentage of Lone Pine could be used for pre-K. That leaves about 40,000 square feet of Lone Pine for other programs. So right now, we're kind of working with Todd Bidlack and Learning Services to see what the STEM STEAM would be. And then the next step would be with robotics, like we did about a year and a half ago. The one option they may just stay right there at Franklin. And the storage part that's kind of in the middle gets relocated. That might be an option.
But I mean, in terms of meeting with the groups, when
I'd say
do
probably
you
the next
think?
30 days.
Next 30 days?
Yeah, so
you'll
school's
meet
out. So again, congratulations to the graduating class and upcoming. So I'm thinking the next 30 days. Again, we've already had a chance to meet with facilities, transportation, looking at various options for them. And then, like I said, the next steps would be Learning Services and the robotics here in the next 30 days, and then come back to the full board here in August with options and recommendations. So.
And then the second question, going through all the presentations, just high level. So is everything expected to open up on time? And then what would be, in terms of additional constructions done, what, if any, would be disruption to students when all these new facilities opened up in October?
Yeah, so for North Hills, South Hills, Conant Way, Eastover, and Lone Pine, we're very pleased to say furniture is on site, technology is on site. We're looking at trying to get teachers in the second week in August to allow them 3 to 4 weeks prior to school starting to really set up their classrooms. So we're very confident that all 4 of those elementaries and 2 middles will be ready for the fall.
Well, but I guess the question, in addition, I mean, that's great. Will there be any disruption? And are we, in terms of construction going on?
Yeah, actually, we're going to take a break over the school year. So one of the things you're going to see coming up in future bid packs is that other remaining work that's more of finishes, fixtures, et cetera. We're anticipating that to take place over the summer of next year. So not to impact the elementary schools or middle schools going forward.
And then the final question I have is in terms of the original book that we had, in terms of what was in scope. In here is a number that you presented, 4.2 million, eliminated project scope, and then eliminated potential technology and infrastructure. Can you high level, what is that $6 million that's been eliminated from the original scope, what that is?
Absolutely. So in the June 8th board packet, you had the overall Excel spreadsheet you see here with all the colors. On the right-hand side, there's 4 specifics. So for instance, on the eliminated projects at Conant, I'll pick on one. So mechanical abatement. So the district's done a really good job over the last 10 years when you're using sinking fund dollars for mechanical electrical upgrades, that the abatement allowance that was there was not needed. We looked at the generator quick connect for about $50,000 for a lot of these schools. Jake McDermott's experience over at Novi Schools and Southfield Schools is really you can actually take the generators and actually plug them primarily into the switchgear, so eliminating that, that generator quick connect. Also at Conant, originally in the bond there was 5 phases that were going to take place, so there was an allowance of roughly $139,000 of electrical need for 2 other sub-meters, if you will. We got that designed down to 3 spaces, so that was a cost avoidance, if you will. Some of the large ones, I'll tell you, like Bloomfield Hills Middle School, the roofing is there. Again, Structure Tech has actually done a really good job analyzing your roofs over the last 10 years. Again, this was done in 2019. There's about a $1.15 million allocation for that. It doesn't need to be replaced today, but again, it could be replaced at the end of the bond or potentially a sinking fund, which again, the board took action on. Some of the others, for instance, International Academy, a large roofing portion of that is getting paid out of the sinking fund. So there's a small allowance in there, about $30,000. Again, not sufficient enough. So again, the board made a decision. So some of these are kind of a culmination of, I'll call it eliminated infrastructure or cost avoidance. When you look at potential reductions, again, the art room was actually converted into special ed, so we didn't have to replace all the plaster traps and things of that nature going forward. Electrical upgrades, again, we did test the switchgear. There is positive power coming in, and it's pretty stable, so we didn't have to replace that switchgear for about $224,000. And then lastly, West Hills, a lot of it was, I'll call it site work. So the concrete's actually decent. The ramping, so again, it's really just taking a hard look at what was done in 2019, taking a look at the critical infrastructure, safety, ADA, and making sure we're getting to that.
Is any of the technology reduction, is that impacting students? Is that, what is that technology reduction?
Yeah, so the technology reduction piece, roughly $1.6 million. There was allowance about $1,026,000 for future technology associated with construction. And again, it's an 8-year program, and so there was a thought of, hey, if I put, let's say, an addition at IA of 6 classrooms, you want to have some dollars allocated for that. Now that addition may not take place out of the bond, so that's one of those reductions from a technology perspective we could look at. Another one would be a student attendance management system, almost like an RFID. Again, it was identified as a potential option for the board. Again, that's one of those projects that's kind of like in the last phase of the bond program. So those are the two major components that make up that about $1.6 million. I will tell you the computer replacements and teacher, about 740 units for teachers and 4,800 refreshes. That is still part of the overall bond that will be going forward. So I know originally that was talked about potentially staying as a future reduction. Our recommendation is to keep that as base scope at this point.
Is there a savings if the issue of the bus, you know, if the idea that the board ends up coming up with other savings for us as a board to determine that some of those technology needs can go back into the bond? Absolutely. If there are savings ultimately?
Yeah, that's ultimately the goal. Is you have a program reserve or contingency of that $2.3 million. Let's say we get done with this phase of work and there's $2 million that gets pushed below. Every single time we come back to the board is, what would you like to do with those allocation of funds? Okay. Is it to go back and look at some of that infrastructure? Is it to help enhance technology, et cetera? So ultimately the board has the say. Our job is really to make, provide the information so you can make educated decisions as a board going forward.
Trustee Kumar?
I have no further questions. You've all touched on a lot of these.
All of them.
So over to you.
Trustee Van Gemmer?
I don't have any questions.
Paul covered it.
So when we say potential for like potential infrastructure reduction, what you mean by potential is just it's up to us to determine to reduce or not. This is not like we don't know if it's possible. We know it's possible. It's just a matter of a decision of what to reduce.
I'll give you an example, like for instance, at West Hills, if you go back to that June 8th meeting, there's about $43,000 of select electrical upgrades. I'm pretty sure you rely on Jake McDermott, his expertise, say, listen, you've tested with your construction engineers, et cetera, replace the building mounted lights, they're high pressure sodium, they're still working. So those are some of those things that would be nice to have, but again, not necessarily, unless we said there's a initiative from the board of doing something holistically, then our job would be to come back with those funds and say, here's options A, B, and C going forward. So I also just wanted to thank Trustee Van Gemmer, Trustee Kumar, and Trustee Colin for the time over the last quarter. Really take a hard look to make sure that this forecast model was in a spot that we felt very confident with going forward. Again, being as transparent as possible with some of those reductions and potential eliminations. So,
I just have one question. On slide 13, so there are only 15 bars. There's 16. Is there one? Are we, so the grid?
Bid packs 1 through 5, kind of district-wide renovations. Okay. That might be why you're seeing 15 versus the 16.
So then, if I slide across, so building demolition is just not lined up on my computer.
Yeah, so building demolition is really for your Fox Hills and potentially Lone Pine. So as part of the bond, those are called to be demoed with the relocation of K5 out of Lone Pine over to West Hills. So.
And that's not scheduled till 2025?
Yep, 25, 26.
25, 26. And then just going back to Paul's question earlier, just so I can visualize, the activity that's going to happen in the fall, I'm looking at quarters, correct? So which quarter would that be? Quarter 2 or 3?
For which specific project?
For the projects that won't happen in the fall of '23.
Oh, gotcha. So if you take a look at transportation, maintenance, again, would be in the design phases, kind of based on there going forward. We talked about the Eastover and Lone Pine renovations phase 2, and then obviously there's the high school piece. The one thing we did want to point out also is you'll see Conant kind of on hold. So remember there was about a $2.9 million addition at Conant. That's part of that analysis. We want to come back in August to say, should we just keep the Conant in the current configuration and then expand at Lone Pine? So again, we've been, I know Ms. Gerlach's been through the building a couple times with the architects, really provides some great insight. That's part of the overall analysis as well. So you'll see that one kind of on hold. But the thought would be if something was to be added, let's say added onto Conant, that'd be in the fall of '25. If it does stay in its current configuration, we'd anticipate doing the Lone Pine conversion over the summer of '24. So that'd be about the only change from that. And again, Lone Pine's a much larger facility than what would potentially be at Conant. Again, we'll want to bring that back to the full board here in that August timeframe to allow you to opine on that.
But like 6.1 and 6.2, the playground equipment and the site work, those will be done by fall?
Yes.
23?
That's actually in place. So that's why I appreciate the board approving that a couple board meetings ago to make sure we got it on site and they're actually in play.
Yeah, they're constructed, the equipment's ordered. You guys have passed the bid packs, and construction is on site, starting to grade, mobilize, and erect the stuff here soon.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, just as a follow, so all those, to your point earlier, when we're looking at current sites, playground equipment, renovations at Conant Way, so when we say the quarters, it's not going to be interruption during the school year. So everything will be open and all work. There's not going to be construction going on during the school year. So for our community who's concerned, which
I know the last 2 years have been, again, appreciate the principals' patience, the parents, the community. There was a lot of activity at South Hills. I know Rainey English has been great to work with, communicating that going forward. Same thing with the principals at at Wade, Conant, and obviously the additions, the interiors at Lone Pine and Eastover. But our goal is by September 1st, we are off sites, and there's punch list and maybe some closeout.
Punch list will be addressed, obviously, over the course of the next 6 to 8 months after that, but it's not going to be any large-scale construction or anything.
And finally, my final question is, I see what's on hold, so you're going to come back in 60 days with a recommendation for next steps on a couple of things. Would that be executed in whatever the recommendation is in this fall, or would that be a year out?
Yeah, so right now, transportation, you'd go into probably 6 to 8 months of design, depending on the site. The good news is we already have the 25,000 square foot building laid out. Now it's a matter of kind of placing on various sites and coming back to the board saying, here's option A, B, C, and D. If for Lone Pine specifically, if it's more of just interior renovations and expanding the current footprint, that would be done in the summer of '24. If you said, you know what, we want to do this $3 million addition at Conant, that would be the fall of '25. So that'd be another year and a half of construction.
So whatever is decided in 60 days, whatever, would probably be a year out, right?
Yeah, so I would say by the fall of '24, specifically for pre-K, that would be, again, either an interior renovation. Again, it'd be the fall of '25 for transportation, and let's say you put an addition at Conant. But that'll be part of that presentation we can do in August. So appreciate the questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great night. Next, we have item number 12, general discussion, data and student outcomes presentation for the winter '23, spring '24. We have Carrie Crocker, our district assessment coordinator and data specialist. That's what we call her. She's about to give her a new title.
All right, thank you, board members. So today I'm here to share our end of the year benchmark achievement data only. This has been part of our continuous improvement process. Our benchmark data that's shared mid-year and end of the year correlates nicely with the State School Aid Act, Section 98B, for assessment reporting. So just some quick reminders. We do our benchmark assessment screener. It's given in grades K through 9 3 times a year. We use the FastBridge assessment. It is computer adaptive, so the questions adjust as students answer the questions, so it adjusts up or down based on how the students answer those questions. It replaced our old benchmark assessment NWA from 2020 and previous years, so we've been using it for approximately 3 years now. It is a universal screener, so that it tells us which students might need support from us with our interventionists and learning specialists, and it supports MTSS, which stands for Multiple Tiered Systems of Support. We do use additional tools aside from our FastBridge screener to progress monitor students and then decide on goals and groups that we might need to pull for support or intervention. The nice thing too about FastBridge is that it offers family reports, and so we send those home 3 times a year as well to our families. The other assessment data that I will share with you tonight is our Fountas and Pinnell literacy data. So just a quick reminder about Fountas and Pinnell. Our teachers meet one-on-one with our students, and the student selects a fiction or a nonfiction text to read. The book is leveled, and the teacher listens to the child read aloud. In some cases, the students read a portion out loud and then read the rest silently as they go up through their reading levels. The teachers listen and watch to see how the child is decoding the words. They're listening for their fluency and how their tone is through the text, and if the students are paying attention to punctuation as they read. And then at the end, they have a comprehension conversation to see if the child understood what they were reading and could make sense of the text. So as teachers watch the children, they review all of this information to ascertain the reading level for a child. And the teacher then reviews all this information that they gather to see where a child's reading independently, where they don't need teacher support, so they can provide books in their kids' book bin in their classroom at those levels. And then they also look to see where they might instruct a student and if they need further support. And it helps guide instruction in the classroom, and that's the purpose of that assessment. And then we, as a district, collect that information so we can see how our students are progressing through those reading levels by grade. This assessment is given in kindergarten through 5th grade. Typically, we do kindergarten students as they're ready to take this assessment. Some of our kindergarten learners, our early learners, come to us not reading yet. So some are building those foundational skills and early literacy skills. And as students are ready, we begin giving the Fountas and Pinnell reading assessment as they begin reading and learning words. So just a little bit about that assessment. I like to show this because this comes from the Michigan Assessment Consortium. We think about a balanced approach to an assessment system in a school district. We have national assessments that are given. You see those at the bottom. It's a very small amount that we might use of that. State assessments, which would be our M-STEP information. And then we have district assessments, which we give, which that's what we're going to talk about tonight, FastBridge. That's one of our district assessments. Fountas and Pinnell is more of a classroom assessment. And then there's formative assessments that we give. And you can see that that takes up the largest chunk at the top of the triangle. Teachers do this every day, breathing in and out of a classroom, where they might share a learning target with the students of something they're learning, like can we count pennies, right? Or can we trade in a nickel for 5 pennies. So, and then they're looking to see if the students are meeting the learning target, and they're assessing the learning and observing the students as they're using coins. This is just an example. And that's a formative assessment. They're watching to see how the students are doing. It's a performance assessment, but it's also considered a formative assessment because it's happening right there live in the classroom while students are learning with their teacher and they have a learning target. So I like to share this to show you that in a balanced assessment system, formative assessment and classroom assessments take up the heaviest amount of lift to support learning in a classroom. At the end of the day, we know all of this assessment work is important because, you know, when we think about what learning looks like in a classroom, this is for all of our students. We use this information along with observation and feedback in classrooms. Aside from student work samples, their readers and writers notebooks, this is all data that we use when we're looking to guide practice in a classroom and make decisions about instruction and learning. So this is just an overview slide of the data that you're about to see. So we're going to take a look at just our district overview of how we did this year from fall to spring with A reading, our adaptive reading, and adaptive math with FastBridge, and then a district overview of our Fountas and Pinnell data. So when we take a look at our adaptive math, which is given in grades K through 9, with the FastBridge assessment, the benchmark assessment score that you see here is based on criterion used to predict risk. Benchmark scores are based on cut scores at each grade level, at each testing window, and it's an increasing benchmark score across the year within each grade level. The goal, it really helps us, it's a screener to see how kids did with core instruction in the classroom. The goal from FastBridge is that 80% or more of students will exceed the low-risk benchmark. And so this graph shows how the percentage of students at the benchmark for each testing window, how they did with adaptive math at each window. We can see that in the fall, 84% of our students in grades K through 9 were at the benchmark in the fall. The benchmark expectation increases with each window. Kids grow anywhere from 4 to 10 points across the school year, depending on the grade level. We can see in the spring that 83% of our students were at the benchmark expectation. The light purple color denotes the students who are meeting or exceeding the benchmark. The dark purple indicates those who are close to the benchmark or considered low risk. The light pink denotes the students that have some risk, and the dark pink denotes the percentage of students that have high risk. So when we look at the spring, 4% of our students are at high risk of not meeting benchmark expectations in a grade level, and we're looking at those students to provide the most intensive supports. So far, the trend with the high-risk group over the last years has remained between 4 and 5%. When we're thinking about the way that we look at our tiers of support in a multi-tiered support system, or MTSS, the goal is always, when looking in core instruction, which is in the classroom, that we're at least meeting the needs of 80% of our students. At Tier 2, what you would see in any district is that we're at least, it would hover around 15% of students that might need that Tier 2 or extra level of support. And then Tier 3 is usually around 5% of students. And so what we're seeing here is what you would typically see in a multi-tiered systems of support. This is what we want to see in the data. The next graph shows our A reading data, so very similarly. A reading is given in grades 1 through 9. Kindergarten takes early reading. We're going to see that data in just a little bit. But same idea, that in terms of support, we want to at least make sure that 80% of our students are meeting at least that low-risk benchmark, and we are at that for each testing window overall for the district. These next graphs show normative growth. So norms compare grade levels to national norms. It's a peer-to-peer comparison. It compares each student's ranking as compared to students in the same group. So this particular report shows normative growth of students across the year. The red would be considered flat growth. The gold is modest growth, the green is typical growth, and the blue is the 85th percentile or higher, which shows aggressive growth from fall to spring across our school year. So this answers the question, this growth report shows growth across the school year, and this answers the question, how effective was our Tier 1 and our interventions? We want to maintain students who are at grade level benchmark in the fall and increase the number of students not at the fall target, and ensure students who are above the target stay above the target and continue to grow. The students in the bottom 20th percentile, we know will need some intervention to meet benchmarks, and so we've been providing that all year long. Students may need to be watched closely or need intervention across a school year. What we can see here, and I just want to remind people of how this is different from the percent of students at benchmark compared to our norms or normative growth. When we're talking about 30% or at the 30th percentile, we're not talking about percent. We're not talking about kids that have 30% mastery. We're really talking about kids based on growth at the 30th percentile. So that means they scored on this assessment. If we were to rank the kids from 0 to 100 and a child was at the 30th percentile, that means across the nation, with growth, 70% of students did better than that student, and 29% of students performed lower than that particular student. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about normative growth. So they're looking at their growth across the school year and their percentile ranking in the nation with growth. So that's what this data is showing you. So when we look at our higher end, you know, it's comparative, and these students may stand out as being in the top of the class or may need enrichment. When we look at that teal color, we can see in the spring we had 33% of students in that 85th percentile or higher. So based on this graph, we can see the teal is 33% of our students in the 85th percentile, the light green is 55% of our students in the 30th to 84th percentile. The orange and gold color shows that 6% of our students in the 20 to 29th percentile, and we have 6% of our students that are in the 0 to 19th percentile. And what I put for you on the bottom for both reading and math is the number of students. So when you see 1,065, that's the number of students that we have in our district that are exceeding expectations for growth. And then 1,781 is typical growth for the grade level. And then modest growth is the 187, and then 202 students are at that flat growth.
What is the vertical bar?
That kind of marks about where the 50th percentile would be. And then this is the same data, the normative growth compared to national norms, growth from fall to spring across the school year. And then again, you see the percent of students that are within that percentile ranking based on growth. And then the number of students is recorded at the bottom for you, so you can see how many students that is. Okay, so that's FastBridge, just overall overview. With Fountas and Pinnell.
Would you like for us to wait for the whole presentation, or do you want to do it by test?
It's fine with me if you want to ask a quick question. If that's
Other people do. That's why I want to know, do you want to do it by exam or do it by section, or would you like for us to wait for the entire presentation?
So if you're asking my preference, I would prefer to get through the presentation and then go back to slides if that's okay.
I want to make sure, because everybody's at, you know, we want to.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
Welcome.
Okay. So our district data, right? So children typically grow anywhere from 2 to 3 reading levels across a school year. With the first grade is the exception because they tend to grow anywhere from 6 to 8 reading levels. They have many reading levels to get through by the end of first grade, so they're the exception. So this data shows that we had 81% of students meeting grade level expectations in the fall in grades 1 through 5. If you remember, kindergarten gets assessed closer towards January because many of them are learning how to read. In the spring, we have 81% of students meeting the grade level expectations for the end of the school year. Students who are approaching expectations are typically students who are still within the grade level. They might just to be 1 or 2 reading levels off of what the end of the year cut is. It doesn't mean they didn't make growth. All of our students start in a different place with reading. The does not meet expectations area means that children are anywhere from 3 to 6 reading levels behind their peers. It doesn't mean they didn't make growth. It just shows what we're showing you right now is just where we ended this school year with support with K through 5. And when I say 81%, what I'm doing is I'm putting together the meets expectations and the exceeds expectations, because that's what we're looking for. Meets expectations meant that they hit the end of the year benchmark expectation for that grade level with their reading level. And then exceeds expectations means they're above the grade level expectation. So that's what we're looking at. This next is sort of a deeper breakdown. This is for you here by grade level. So we're diving down a little bit deeper into the data. So when we look at A math for K through 9, we can see that 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 7th, and 8th grades pretty much maintained the percent of students at benchmark from fall to spring. We can see that kindergarten, 5th, 6th, 9th show just a slight decrease in the percent of students at benchmark. First grade shows an increase. And keep in mind that the benchmark expectation increases with each testing session, fall, winter, and spring. They have a higher expectation to meet. What we see here is A reading, and I've included kindergarten, which takes early reading, which is a different assessment. We know that the A reading is computer adaptive. Early reading are one-on-one assessments done by the teacher. So there's 4 one-minute tasks that the kids have to complete in kindergarten, and there's different tasks that they have to complete at each testing window. So one of the things that we're noticing here, so children, we know children are on grade level, they're just trying to reach a higher benchmark. We can see slight increases for the spring assessment window in grades 1, 2, and 3. 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th remained about the same from fall to spring. The most significant change is kindergarten, and in having some conversations at our recent MyKit meetings, we need to work with the kindergarten teachers more this fall to understand why there's such a big discrepancy in the data, because the classroom data that we have, the Fountas and Pinnell data that we have, our Michigan Literacy Progress Profile assessments that we have with the students are showing much better results and showing our kids are reading. So we're trying to understand why some of these basic early literacy skills, these 1-minute time tests, kids are not scoring as well on. So we have some work to do with our kindergarten teams this fall to understand why that discrepancy is happening when our other data is showing us a counter narrative to how our students are doing. This particular data set is by demographic group. So we can see our district average for the spring was 84% of students at benchmark. In the fall, and then the spring it's 83%. So while the percentage of students meeting the increasing benchmark is good, we know we have to review each group individually. We can still see that there's work to do with students experiencing poverty, students with IEPs, and Black African American students from this data set. Just shows how the students scored across the district from fall to spring. This next data set is a reading, so very similar. We can see that our district average stayed the same from fall to spring. Our English language learners increased from fall to spring. Our students experiencing poverty increased from fall to spring. We see students with IEPs dropping just a little bit from 42 to 40%, and our Black African American students stayed about the same, like at 55% across the board. I wanted to take the opportunity to take some time to share about Wing Lake as well, because they have their own assessments that they do for students. And what you're seeing here is the 2-year math average, so from fall of 21, winter of 22, all the way through to spring of 2023. So in the last 2 years, the math scores have increased by 1.27 points. Wing Lake was sharing that they now have data, which they've taken 3 years in a row. So they have something for staff to see and look at student growth over time using some formative and informative assessments to enhance the learning environment at Wing Lake. We know that the teachers are using this data to work individually with students and drive instruction in their classrooms. Due to the severity of Wing Lake students' medical needs, the winter scores tend to decline a little bit due to student illness and absence, but students are able to make up for lost skills and typically show gains in the spring benchmark. Their building growth, student growth goals for the last 2 years have shown student growth in all classrooms, something to be super proud of. 2 years ago, it was a math goal, and this year it was a literacy goal tied to social and emotional learning. Same thing with literacy. We see the 2-year trends, and they've gone from 5.3 on average with their assessment to 5.59, and we can see an increase up to 6.7 this spring. So in the last 2 years, their reading scores have increased by 2.07 points. Wing Lake was also able to work together as a school community, become a No Place for Hate school. They've involved students and families and staff in designing a pledge that was in the core. A language that all Wing Lake students can understand. They are the first in the country to use core language in this way. Wing Lake was proud to work together to welcome and include all students and work together to make their community a better place. There's a Wing Lake Playground Committee that's comprised of staff, and they developed a plan for improving their playground. And they look forward to future collaboration with the district and Board of Education related to this work as well. And they successfully raised $18,000 at their Top Golf fundraiser that was held on June 4th. So I just want to share that with you.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I think we're about to see it. Do you want to add anything? No, thank you. Okay.
You're welcome.
Thought I'd ask because I know you're here. So the next set of slides, and I'm just going to go over one of them so that we can move ahead, but what we see is Conant here. And so when we look at the top left graph, right, it indicates the students that met the benchmark expectation in math. It shows you all 3 testing windows, so fall, winter, spring. Obviously, we're looking at the purple because we want to make sure over 80% of our students are above that low-risk benchmark. We can see in the fall, they were at 84%. In the winter, they were at 83%. And then in the spring, they were at 82%. So when you read that, fall, winter, spring goes from left to right. When we look at the bottom left graph, that's the A reading assessment. So we can see in the fall, they were at 79%. In the winter, 81%. And in the spring, 82% of students meeting or exceeding the benchmark expectations. When we take a look at the upper right-hand corner for Fountas and Pinnell, we can see that over 80% of their students in the fall in grades 1 through 4 were meeting or exceeding expectations for reading based on their reading level at that time of year. In the spring, right, the scores change a little bit because now we've added in kindergarten. So in looking at all of our kindergarten through 4th grade students, we can see that at Conant, there are 85% of students meeting or exceeding the reading benchmark for the end of the school year. So each building has a graph, 4 graphs in it, just like this, so that you get a breakdown by building of how each site did. I would also like to note that for further detail, already on our transparency dashboard as part of the State School Aid Act, we are also asked to give a breakdown by building, by demographic group. And so there's additional detail that you would find on our transparency dashboard as well. So I'm going to move ahead because each building is very similar, but I just want to explain the graphs and how to look at those. The additional data that I always like to share with you is we get some of our preliminary MSTEP, and one of the things that the state looks at is how many students, based on that read by grade 3 law, if they do not pass the MSTEP assessment, are supposed to be considered for retention. That law has changed, and starting in the spring of 2024, we still have to follow the students that may need support based on the MSTEP, but we will no longer have to retain them in 3rd grade because of their MSTEP score. But we still have to provide support and interventions and assessments and monitor those students based on their MSTEP scores. So this is the first year. It's very similar to our previous years where we had less than 1%. In the previous 2 years, we didn't have any students that needed to be retained. This year, we had 3 total out of our entire 3rd grade student body that took the MSTEP assessment this spring. We've met with the families. The principals have taken time to talk to them. A couple of our students are students with IEPs, and another student that met one of the other exception rules for a student not to be retained is if it's in the best interest of the child, or we have other data that says otherwise. The MSTEP score may be off, but we have additional data that says they're on grade level and then they can move on to 4th grade. So based on the meetings with the families, none of our students will be retained. We've met with them and talked with them about the 3rd grade reading law and have made decisions on those children to move on to 4th grade at this time. But we did have 3 based on their MSTEP that would have been considered for retention. I like to share, as we're looking at the data, some of our key takeaways. I mean, of course, the exciting thing is, in terms of multiple tiered systems of support, 80% of our students are at benchmark or higher at the end of the year across the district. The testing window actually closed. The last date that teachers can enter data and finish testing is May 31st. And so we just have those last couple of weeks to actually pull and compile that data, which takes a few days. That takes some time to do. And the expectation at the end of the year is that buildings take time to go back and review that with their school improvement teams. it's the end of the year, so really it's a sort of a summary at the end of the year because learning and instruction has already happened, and teachers and teams have already put goals and strategies into place to support kids throughout the year, and so we're at that point where it's our end result. What will be coming soon? Well, I'll share this in a second. I'll come back to it. Obviously, our administrators, teachers, coaches, our English language development teachers, resource room teachers, classroom teachers, we know that they work hard to analyze their students, and they're trying to have an understanding of how they did. As a learning services team, we try to work with each building and really talk with them and the interventionists to understand the student stories and what they experienced this year, what interventions worked, what didn't, what strategies supported your students the best, and where might we need to make some tweaks. And where can we provide resources? So we know we have a high percentage of students of all meeting benchmark, but as you saw in some of the demographic groups, just with the overall for the district, we still have work to do to continue to support some of our individual student groups, like students experiencing poverty, students with IEPs, Black African American students. Overall, it is successful when we look at this as a screener. One of the things that our teams are doing right now, we have this end of the year continuous improvement plan. It's a 100-page report. So we outline more detail than you're getting here of our district assessment data. And then each building submits a report where it has their year-by-year data that we're looking at over time and looking at trends. It will also have their benchmark assessment data by season. They also have it in there by demographic as well. And then they put in the strategies and the activities and the things that they've tried this year to best support their students. And so that's shared and it's made public. I just put pictures here to show you how we align that to our academic objectives in the district. But you get a report on the side that shows the goals, it shows the data, and then underneath you see everything that each building tried. So if you want more analytical data and you want the narrative of what each building was trying, you'll see that in that report. That will come out next week, and it will be available on our transparency dashboard, just like the detailed data that you would find in the 98B report, which is a little bit shorter. It's 2 pages. So one's more of a data, here's the data. The other one is more of analysis of the data and what each building tried. So when I go to this slide, this is what I'm talking about. The 98B report, which I've already shared, is on our transparency dashboard already, but it gives a more detailed breakdown. Obviously, we know at the end of the year, each building is really taking time to review and meet with the teams to try to put in, and talk about what worked, what didn't. As we look towards next year, we know that we're going to be in reconfigurations with K-5, and so we'll have new data sets to look at to see how kids did with the transition as we move sites. We know our learning services team will be meeting over the summer and the fall to look at how our students did overall, look at each building's report, and then analyze where do we need to put resources and time and effort as we look to next year. And then we make those part of our MyKit plan for next year when we're looking at our goals and strategies. We'll continue to work with our MTSS leadership team on data and the ways that we provide interventions and supports to students. And then obviously we continue to progress monitor our students along the way with all of our data. I think that's it.
Thank you. We'll start with Trustee Kumar.
Thank you, Michelle. So Carrie, towards the end of the deck,
yes,
there's a slide on high school participation in exams, right? That's on slide 33. So that shows a trend from year to year. It's on slide, probably may not be in your.
I was on the high school.
It looks like it's not.
It's different. It's taken off.
It's
Okay.
updated IB AP test preparation, participation.
So to me,
yeah, it's not in the slide deck.
that's great data, awesome. It's got a trend there from year to year,
Yeah.
right? So if we're serious about improving, student outcomes with the philosophy of continuous improvement, shouldn't we be looking at data from last year to this year? I guess we're taking the test 3 times a year, but if you look at every building, why are we not looking at the data from last year and comparing it to this year, right? So if you look at the Wing Lake data, for instance, on, whatever slide, I forget the number of the slide, slide 19 or 18, right? It shows data by each, I guess,
Each
fall,
testing
winter,
window for the last 2
spring,
years, yeah.
over a 2-year period, right? And so you can clearly see trends, or you can identify what the causation may be for that trend, right? Why aren't we doing something over a longer time span for the other buildings, and why are we just looking at 1 year's worth of data?
Okay, so to answer that question for now, what I did in the board update last week is I actually put the cohort data in by year for the last 3 years for fall and spring, for like since we started Fastbridge. So I put that in the board update for you.
But that's not.
For Fastbridge.
Okay, and so isn't that what we would want to share with the community as well? Looking at those trends,
Sure.
instead of just data by building for 1 year?
Yeah, I'm happy if you would like, if it's the request of the full board, to create some graphs with that same data, and I'm happy to put it on our data dashboard for all,
Okay,
if that would suffice.
okay, that would help. Because at the end of the day, if we're serious about looking at improving outcomes, we really ought to look at it on a trend basis over a longer period of time. And to me, what we're showing here may not necessarily represent that trend.
Okay, thank you.
That would be my concern. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Kumar. Trustee Van Gemeren?
2 questions. I'm trying to figure out where I put the presentation all of a sudden. I was looking up something here. First question is, if we go back to the Fastbridge data, and it's got fall, winter, spring, and the one that has the growth percentages, right? This one, any of these, right? So you start, the way it was described is that, let's look at fall, that 7% of the students are in a 0 to 19 growth percentile, right? What is that, how does Fastbridge calculate growth? And then like specifically, how would they calculate it in the fall, right? So let's say you got your kindergartners, how are they calculating what their growth is the first time they take the test, right? Or is that fall saying from last spring? Like how are they calculating growth? Do you know?
In the fall, I would say for kindergarten, they're assessing, they're just ranking them nationally where they are right then. But as we look at the graphs, from winter to spring and kids that have been here previously, they are looking at their growth from spring to fall. So if a student has taken it previously, they're looking at their growth over time from like session to session.
So
and then
this graph
here
is
we have fall to
specific
spring.
to growth in
Yes.
some fashion?
Correct. It's their national growth percentile from fall to spring.
Does that have to do with?
It doesn't make.
And I pulled the explanation straight from Fastbridge as well that I shared with you.
Like, I've gotten, when you get it, the report,
Right.
and I know, like, for my kids, I can see, like, a trend
Yes.
line.
Mm-hmm.
So is that trend line for each kid, it's like you said, going from test to test, showing
Right.
how they rank nationally?
Yes.
Right.
So I think that
Yes,
is what.
correct.
Right, but I'm just, it's kind of confusing to me as to how they can calculate the growth, like, their ranking as far as how well they're growing, right? I can see that maybe they, these students are scoring a certain percentage versus their peers across the nation, but not necessarily that they're growing this much compared to their peers. It's confusing as to how they're calculating that, I guess, that's all, so.
Yeah, I mean, basically, they say it's a peer comparison. It compares each student's ranking as compared to students in the same group. So it's giving them a national percentile ranking based on where they start and then their growth across the year.
Okay, and then is there a different assessment as to where they rank just on their score versus their?
Those
their
would be
peers?
the purple graphs. So
Okay.
like if we have a fourth grader in math, and let's say in the fall, they scored 227, which is on track, and in the spring, let's say they're supposed to grow 4 to 8 points, let's say they're supposed to be at 235 at the end of fourth grade, right? So when you look at those purple graphs on the previous slide, if they're still on track in the spring, right, we take all the students that were on track that grew that 4 to 8 points or whatever, and I'm reporting out the percent of students that were at benchmark, so met the cut score for that time of year.
Okay. And then
So that's where it's different. The purple slides, the purple and the pink are
Right.
more the percent of students that are at benchmark, whereas the red, gold, green, and teal is their normative growth,
Gotcha.
percentile ranking.
And then my second question is just for the community. You mentioned that some of the disaggregated data is available. Where is that specifically?
Okay, so on our main website, there's like a Michigan button, and that's our transparency dashboard. And so when you click on that, and then you go down to educational goals, and you open that up, that's where you'll find all of our 98B reporting and our continuous improvement reports.
Thank you.
Trustee Fowler?
Yeah. I wasn't ready. Are students that are considered low risk ever put through MTSS countermeasures?
So I would say it depends, right? Typically, when we sit down and we do a data dig with teachers, we're looking at that benchmark score. Low risk is still considered like on track. They're on grade level. They're where they're supposed to be for that time of year. Because remember, this is a screener to see who might need support. So Fastbridge would say those kids really don't need support. But that's just based on one data point, right?
Yeah.
We would want to look at their, like, so if it was math, for example, I would want to look at some of their formative assessments in the classrooms. In the classroom, I would want to know what are their Envision math unit assessments or their Big Ideas math. What is their unit assessment saying? What is the teacher observing if they're giving quizzes or whatever? Like, what is the other data telling you about how the student is doing, or how are they performing in their math tasks across the classroom, or any other formative assessments that they have? So we always want to look at the students falling into any category and then use or triangulate some other data points with that to say, yep, this is on target. I'm seeing the same thing in the classroom. The nice thing about Fastbridge is if for each kid it gives sort of a menu to say the child scored here, here's some teaching points that child is ready for. So if the teacher's data was also saying from the classroom, yeah, this is a student, they are low risk, they're doing okay, they're on grade level, but they might need some support with fractions. And then we would then look at who might be best to support some additional small group work with fractions with that student. So we sort of have to look at the data and decide, is it on track, right, with that other data? They don't really need support, or no, I have some other data from my classroom that says, yeah, we might need to do some additional work with a topic.
Okay, so that it's not by itself one trigger point, it's just another data point that you will
Right.
use to determine
Correct.
when to give another intervention with some other measure. Okay,
Yeah.
makes sense.
So kids that do fall in that low risk may need support too, but we look at all of them.
Right.
Right, and our kids that are at the high end, we're looking to see, like, what are some ways and opportunities that we can enrich them.
Okay, makes sense. Yeah, we missed, there was a slide on there, update on IB and AP test participation.
Yeah,
Is it
somehow
here?
that wasn't in my slide deck, but I don't know if anybody wants to talk about APIB?
No.
I think it was a really good thing to talk about. That's why I didn't want to skip over it. Like, this
Yeah.
is pretty
Do you wanna
remarkable.
swap computers?
Will I just be able to put that in?
Yeah, just plug it in.
I do, yeah.
So while Todd's pulling up that slide, the results don't come out until usually around July 5th. In terms of how they did on the exam, so that will be updated once we have that, and we can go through that data. It takes a couple data dumps for
Yeah.
both AB and IB, AP and IB to do that.
Second to the last line.
Yeah.
It's way at the bottom.
It's at the
There it
it's
is.
the last one, yeah.
So if you remember in the fall, early fall, maybe either August, September, we talked about putting in expectations for if you take an IB or AP course, that you would take either the actual official exam from AP or IB, or that you would take an equivalent final in the class to be able to get the grade bump and have the transcript noted as AP IB on your transcript. So we, through some negotiations with the high school staff and students, we came up with a one-year, I guess, third option, and that would be that they could not take this exam or take the hard final, and instead just choose to just finish the course out, and then their transcript would be changed from AP to IB to advanced. We did that just because those students who signed up for that class did not know the expectations when they signed up. This year coming in, they knew that expectation when they registered for the course. So that third option is not on that table anymore. Right. So now you either take the official or you take the equivalent final to get the AP on your transcript and also to get the grade 5.0 scale. So with that in place, and then with some incredible work by the assistant principals in the back of the room, Kathy McDonald, who was our testing coordinator, Jessica Lapone, and Jason Orrick came later, but he helped support as we went through. We went to the classrooms, we had presentations at the parent night, and we sent all that information out. The result of that is from last year, we had 53% of our students who were enrolled in those courses actually take the exam. This year, we had 92% of students enrolled in AP courses take the exam. For IB courses, 30% last year took the actual exam. This year, we moved that up to 52%. And then overall, 47% of the students enrolled last year took an actual exam, and this year, 83% enrolled actually took the exam. And the reason why I say actually took the exam is there's a difference between those who register, those who enroll, those who register, and then those who actually sit in the seat and actually take the exam. The other data point that is not on this slide, but is in that larger report that was in the Berkeley board update, indicates that our number of students who registered and actually took the exam improved to tremendously. We had a lot of kids last year who registered but never showed up. This year, it was almost, I want to say less than 5% of the students who registered didn't actually take the exam. The year before, that number was much higher. So in the weekly board report, we also talked about the areas of our greatest joy, but this is being one of them. The second one is it does give us an idea of some other courses that we need to look at and to help support the students and teachers in making sure that we have more students take those exams. Todd has some better data about how this affects rankings. I know it's not on there, but.
It's certainly tied to rankings. When we take a look at those rubrics for the various national rankings, where they're pulling data from college and career readiness course offerings are students that are participating in these exams. What they're unable to do is take all of our course selection guidebooks and go through and itemize how many offerings every single high school in the U.S. has. That would be almost an impossible task. And so rather what they're doing is making the assumption that if students are in these classes, they would be taking the exam, and so then that ends up being your correlated to how many course offerings you have that are career and college ready courses, or that you have rigorous courses that are offered at your high school. So when students don't take the exam, it's as though they are invisible in those attendance sheets. So this is how the College Board collects that data, and that is one of the qualifiers that has a significant impact within those rankings, not only if a student is taking a AP or IB exam, but then also if they've taken multiple ones by the time they graduate. And typically, it's always based on the senior class that is graduating and how many they have taken while they've been at your high school. So we should expect this to have an impact in that area. It's certainly going to be a better reflection of how many students we have in some of our higher level courses, at least in terms of what the College Board can see into the participation rates, because we're not able to just send them an attendance sheet saying this is how many kids we have in these classes, but rather it's through this particular assessment practice that they're able to record that.
So, yeah, thank you for, I know I made you guys kind of do that impromptu, but it was in there and I thought that was a really important thing to highlight.
Thank you for letting us highlight that. It's exciting to highlight it.
I wanted to say thank you. Originally, I mean, I know Pat, Superintendent Watson, had pushed for that to be a goal to improve participation rates, and all of the people that have been working here have worked really hard on that, and it's reflected very clearly. I hate that that the byproduct of getting more kids to sign up makes our college readiness score goes up. I hate that that's a really important thing. I wish the focus was not on that, but it's a nice byproduct of it. I think more importantly, though, is that through some of the work that we're doing that we talked about in the study session about math, that we continue to make the barrier to entry to getting into those advanced courses less of an obstacle, which will continue to allow all students the ability to get into these advanced courses and succeed and set them up for whatever they're going to do eventually. But I think this is magnificent to see that kind of a dramatic increase in getting those students in there. So wonderful job.
The unintended consequence of that is now Kathy will confirm that we did a lot of trying to make sure we had enough spaces for testing. So our challenge going into next year is we are really looking at if anyone has a big giant open space that they'd be willing to rent to us for a month, we'd be happy to take it. In terms of finding enough places for testing, but that is a challenge that we will take on every single time to make sure we can get it done. So
great.
Yep, AP and IB testing happen exactly at the same time, and they have very different rules. So that is your challenge. But thank you for letting us highlight that.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Trustee Coleman.
I have one question. I know there's a lot of data in here. Fundamental question that people will ask So the data, when I'm looking at Fastbridge, or even, I'll stick to Fastbridge, then we can go to Fountas and Pinnell. So in the 80s, and if I tell, if someone's asking, coming in, deciding between Bloomfield, Troy, Novi, Northville to live, well, where in terms of in the 80s, in terms of benchmark compared to what? I guess the question that I was just talking with Siva is that, is it good compared to what?
So Fastbridge is nationally normed, right? So when we look at 80% of our students meeting benchmark, the benchmark cut scores are set based on how kids are doing nationally, like where kids should be using our current curriculum and structures, like at any testing window, right? And so it's compared, it's 80% of our students.
So
that's a wonderful thing. And remember, this is a screener to see who might need support.
I get it. I'm just saying the question, whenever data is presented to our community, the question people always look to when they're looking at Bloomfield Hills, and we put a data point, 80%, I don't know, and I'm not being critical, I'm just saying I don't know if that's good or not. Comparing to what? And everyone will say compared to like districts.
But if you want to compare district to district, that's what MSTEP is for, because it compares our students across the state of Michigan. Each district uses a different benchmark assessment. So some districts use NWA, some use Fastbridge, some use iReady, STAR. So there's lots of different assessments. Each district selects their own assessment. And so to say Clarkston, who uses Fastbridge, right, we would have to get permission to ask for their data. So that if you want to look at it, but the dilemma is we're trying to steer away from comparisons when we're looking at a screener data, because each district is different. Clarkston has 8 elementary schools. They have different resources to support their students. They have different demographics. They have different student-to-teacher ratios, different resources. And so how do you compare apples to apples when each district is fundamentally built differently and uses different instructional material resources, different interventions to support their students? They have different ways to deliver MTSS. So it's built to be a screener for us so we can identify students for support. It's not meant to compare district to district.
The way I've answered that question to the community that are shopping scores is MSTEP is the one comparison. That is the one thing you can look at. In each fall, we share those scores. We share it with the community. We show how we did as a school district. We show how we did compared to Oakland County. And then we share how we did compared to districts throughout the state of Michigan. And so we do that every single year. All these other data points aren't comparisons because all other districts aren't using the same assessments. So the M-STEP is the only one for those looking to shop scores and see where we're at compared to others. That is the only comparison with PSAT and SAT for those states where it's mandatory to take those 2 tests.
Or if you're a parent shopping districts, you're going to look at niche surveys or US News, which probably relies a lot on AP and IB data. So
not on FastBridge at all.
No, that's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about overall district ratings are going to be affected a lot by AP and IB testing, right?
What this is suggesting, I think what Paul is asking is, although we don't have direct comparisons with these particular data sets because they would have to be using these as well, what it is suggesting is that our students are doing extraordinarily well. It is suggesting that we are going to be highly competitive because we know that these are nationally normed, and what we're looking at, we know that these are competitive student outcomes. And that means the likelihood that that will transfer over into those state assessments or those common assessment practices for all districts, it would likely show up in that based on what we're seeing here with these internal pieces.
I'm not asking, listen, I've had this discussion for the last year and a half, not asking to go in and get data, but is it fair to say that like districts like us would be in the low 80s?
It's hard when everyone's not using the same tool. So I'll go back to the one thing we can measure and compare, which is M-STEP, which is taken throughout the state of Michigan. And when we shared that data, we did incredibly well. We were one of the few districts in the state of Michigan that actually raised our M-STEP scores in math in the LA coming out of COVID prior to what they were before. One of the few that were able to do that. And when we compared how do we do against Oakland County and then other districts like us, we actually show great improvement over the past 3 years.
And I don't think this is important. I think this is more
a
important to
small
help the
snapshot
schools
for the teachers,
and the teachers
correct,
and the principals to understand, especially for the students where they're not performing well, especially in the disaggregated groups.
It's one
all
data
right,
point.
What are we doing? And more important than this is what was already shared, which was the year by year, but cohort by cohort. Because when you look, it doesn't really, looking at first grade to first grade is irrelevant. Looking at the first grade that moves to second and then moves to third and seeing what happened. Did the MTSS tools that were put in place actually make an effect? That's, I think, what is relevant. This, to me, is less relevant than...
Because, again, last comment of key takeaways, right? And again, I'm just saying, right, if someone's going to ask me, community member, someone moving in, we are experiencing successful results, right? That's a key takeaway of this. And someone can say, based on what? And my answer is what?
I would say based on our M-STEP scores, which are compared against other districts.
This was key takeaways of this report.
From this, that our students are doing well, that they are progressing, and for our students that are showing flat growth or modest growth, we have interventions and different things that we were able to put in place to help our students grow, and that this is one data point. This is one snapshot. You need to take all the data points for the students you individually serve to tell that whole story, a full data story. You can't make huge decisions and movements based on this one little snapshot that's a screener that's put out there.
Right,
and the reason it's presented now twice a year is it's required by law because of the concern over COVID loss. We actually switched our screener from NWA during COVID because we all felt that this was going to be a better tool, and I firmly believe it has been a better tool to help guide our teachers in where we need to provide interventions for our students.
Well, I guess not to cut Paul off, but I've been looking at reports that we've been receiving since I've been on the board, and from this particular test, and our disaggregated groups continue to underperform, and so I'm trying to understand in 3 years, why haven't I seen the growth? If we're looking at performance and we're assessing to see where the needs are and where there are gaps that exist, it doesn't show that for me for those 5 populations. So I guess for me, I need to better understand why am I still seeing that my Black and African American students are still performing at the same level as they did. And you look at the 5th grader, who's now a 6th grader, who will be a 7th grader, am I still going to see that student performing, or the data showing me the 50% that I'm seeing right now? So I have not seen the movement and growth to the levels where I'm seeing the students are in other populations. Our Hispanic population has moved, but I'm not seeing that same growth happen for the students that I'm seeing here that are representative of Black or African American
Could
for
I
the last
respond?
3 years. You may.
Okay. So I have a couple of examples to share with you about what you're speaking about, right? So when we sit down to do these data digs, we're trying to understand what's happening with students so we can make sure people are providing the right interventions and getting and understanding a student's lived experience so that we are supporting them the best way we can and meeting with families. Our teachers and principals are doing that work. But like on my end, where I'm just seeing the overview and the highlights and just looking at the numbers, when I look at 2nd grade, when I'm trying to get some more detail, at the beginning of the year in the fall in 2nd grade, we had 10 out of 24 Black African American students on track with math. In the spring, it's 9 out of 27. And so the same students that were like on track stayed on track, but we had 3 students new to our district that got tested. So it makes the numbers go down. But with that, what I can tell you, like what's happening, so we have 9 on track, what's happening with the rest of the students, right? 17 out of the 27 are students with IEPs in 2nd grade, and 10 of the 27 are students that were on individualized reading intervention plans, where the classroom teacher and interventionists are supporting those students. So we are looking at the data and trying to make sure the students are supported the best way we can to try to increase that growth. I mean, when we see a number, it doesn't mean that they didn't make growth, right? We're just looking at the 9 out of the 24, the 9 out of the 27, but we're trying to dig down in what types of support are being provided. And I can see just from the numbers that we are providing those supports to students. So we think about those 27, 17 are students with IEPs that are getting the most intensive support possible from the experts in the building, and 10 are on reading intervention plans with our interventionists, learning specialists, and our classroom teachers who are trying to provide that support so we can increase scores. Right, and then when we go in to meet with them, we're trying to get some more story behind what's happening too. So that is the work. And then sometimes with this data on my end, sometimes it is a numbers game. Like
So
when I
could
look
you
at
also
9th grade.
Could you give me the same data of what percentage of students that are Hispanic or white or Asian that also fall into those IEP scenarios that are making progress? So I get it that there's a percentage of students that have IEPs that fall in one population, but if we're going to compare, we need to compare apples to apples. So if you're going to provide me with data of how many students that fall in that category that happen to be African American, what population of students that happen to be white, but they're still making a different set of progress. So I want to see if there's growth for some students, there should be growth for all students. So do you have that data for as far as how many students who actually fall in the other populations fall into our IEP or the other population that you identify?
Yes, and I would have to pull that if the board needed it. But that's the work really of our principals and our classroom teachers and our school improvement teams and our MTSS leadership team and our coaches back at the buildings that are doing that work. And then we're trying to meet with them to understand what the needs are and provide the support, the resources, and the training behind those people working with kids.
And I'm not questioning that we're not providing resources and support.
Yeah.
What I am questioning is whether or not we are providing enough adequate resources to move the needle for all of our students within the district. Yeah. And so if we have a test that assesses whether or not that individual student needs a support, are we really providing the directed support that that student needs to move them into the space that they can actually grow? And so if we're not, then we need to figure out how we can. And I'm going to stay on this, and this is what I brought up last year. Mm-hmm. This is what I brought up the first year I was on the board, and I will continue to bring this up until we move the needle. Just my 3 cents.
I do have another question. So one thing I'm confused upon also is, so if we look from fall to spring, numbers are either flat or they've gone down, like math has gone down and reading's flat. So wouldn't we see an increase if we have all these supports in terms of benchmark going up?
The test is different. So
And the cut score changes and goes higher.
Right, so the testing is on what they've learned. I mean, it's not the same test in the fall as it is in the spring. And then to get back to the old, I mean, and I agreed with Michelle. I've asked the same questions also, and I know it's hard work, so I appreciate the detail that you gave us today. The other thing, Paul, is this is an assessment that teachers get the results of quickly, so that they're able to make changes quickly, whereas the M-STEP is something that all students take throughout the state, but it's not something that you can use as a quick change. It's something that you look at to say, okay, 6 months ago, this is where the student was at. Well, a lot has happened. Right, yeah, and so this isn't something that we use for comparison. It's something that the teachers use to make, hopefully in certain circumstances, quick changes to help students grow, you know? And so it's not something that when someone comes to you and asks you like, well, how do I know that these are good scores? I think the answer is it's not something that you're supposed to know whether it's a good score or not. It's a tool that our teachers use. If you want to know whether or not our scores are good compared to other schools, look at the M-STEP scores. I mean,
again, we're presenting, right? I mean, I understand, and maybe we disclaim that this is, irrelevant in terms of determining what's good and what's not good. It's an individualized test. If that's what it is, that's what it is. All I know is data is presented. People are going to ask questions based on the data, and they're trying to understand if we're saying 82% are at benchmark. And the question, I'm not being negative about it, the question is that good,
So,
Paul, or is that bad? And the answer is, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, if 80% or more of our students are at benchmark for any given window, that means our core instruction is working. That's where any district should be, right? That we're meeting the needs of at least 80%. We know that with Tier 2, 15% will need some support to be at grade level because kids learn at different rates and at different times. And then 5% of our students will need intensive support.
right,
And so that's what you should see in a perfect MTSS system.
there are national, comparison. I mean, when you get the report, it compares nationally. So, I mean, and I don't know, I'm not sure if it's in this report or not, but potentially, I suppose you could list the national, percentages, so that the one comparison you can make is, Bloomfield to national. All the schools in the nation that take the test, they do provide that information. So I suppose, would that be helpful maybe if the national
It would,
comparison?
again, and I'm sorry to harp on it, any comparison where you can throw out, I mean, that's what Kerry does is data, right? And people, when they get data, first thing they like to do in anything is compare the data. Compare the data to things that they're similar to.
Right.
Right, I'm just saying, that's,
no,
that's just a reality. Data without a comparison,
Right.
I don't know what, and I'm not being mean about it, I just don't know what that means. It sounds like 84% is good, but if someone, comparison to what, right? I mean, that's all I'm asking. I've been asking this for 2 years. Michelle's been asking her stuff for a year. I've been asking for 2 years. When someone asked me, you presented the data, Paul, is that good? Or, I'm like, it sounds good, but I can only compare it to something to validate whether or not it's good or not.
So Trustee Bangor, to your point, so part of that's in the board update shows where it's nationally normed. But then the question to Trustee Collins, to what schools? To what districts? We don't know. Are they like districts or are they not? Where are they located? What are their other scores? Unless you have that information somewhere.
Well, what I can tell you is that Fastbridge is used in 11,000 school districts across the nation. So millions of students take this assessment, and then they set those benchmarks based on how kids are doing nationally.
But individually, for instance, if Birmingham took the same test, we couldn't pull Birmingham's information and say, I'm just trying to make sure but we can go in and you can say, nationally, there were X amount of schools that completed this
But it
test.
has to be their like districts, and the community members I've spoken to want a comparison to like districts. What did districts like us score? And that is not something we'll be able to do with this tool. So Birmingham, my understanding, they use iReady, so there's no comparison to be had there.
If parents, this is my understanding, if parents are cross-shopping between school districts, the measures that, LST and the high schools put in place for increasing participation in taking exams will probably have a positive impact on our rankings down the road. Is that a fair assessment?
That's a fact.
Oh, I get that, and I appreciate, the high school team learning services. It's been a focus, right? Identifying what the holes were in the rankings, and then a quick fix, right? That has nothing to do with instruction in the high school, which is probably whether it's a year or two out. So I get that, and that's what people do, right, wrong, and different. If this is irrelevant to comparison, because it's impossible to get the data, then just say that up front, and then this is just a tool individually to look at everyone's individual performance.
And for the community members looking for additional data, I would check out the data dashboard and the amount of transparency that's on there. And then that's something that can be easily compared to other districts in the state of Michigan as well. We have quite a bit of data on there that's readily available. And that's just one of the things when people are looking, for opportunities in a new community. They're also looking for recreation opportunities, which we have a nature center and we have a working farm. They're looking at facilities. Facilities matter. If they didn't, so many universities and districts wouldn't upgrade facilities. We're upgrading our facilities. So there's a lot of pieces that people look for when they move into the community, and we've been trying to touch upon all those in the past 30 years, and honestly, we've made a lot of progress in a lot of areas, and there's a lot of areas we still need to grow and get better at, and that's part of being, having these types of discussions and then moving forward and doing what needs to work. And if it doesn't work, then we need to figure that out and try something differently as well.
Yeah, an additional place if parents are doing some research is to go to mysschooldata.org. There's a parent dashboard there where they can look at our state assessment data, and it shows overall, and you can only do it by building. And so that's how you do your search. You have to type in a school building in a district, but it shows how you did compared to others, but then it also shows how you did over the last 3 years of testing cycles, and then it shows how you did with like schools of similar demographics. So that's what the graphs show, and then it also breaks down how English language learners did. It shows teacher to pupil ratios for the building, and if that's changed over time, and it looks at attendance history. But what's nice is that parent dashboard has lots of data at parents' fingertips or families' fingertips to look at how a school did compared to other schools in Michigan and how they did compared to similar schools with like demographics, which is important.
Last year, you also provided us with the breakdown in demographics by school. Could you send that
So I
to
mentioned
us?
that that's already on our transparency dashboard for everyone. So if you go to the main website, right, and you click on the Michigan button that says Transparency Data Dashboard, you click on that and then you go to Educational Goals, and you'll see the 98B report. It's 2 pages, but it gives a breakdown by grade level, then it gives a breakdown by school, by demographic.
Okay.
As well. So that's the more detailed report.
Okay, for next December, oh my goodness. For the fall report, because it was helpful to have it, because I'm comparing information each year. So could we have that put back into the presentation for next time?
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, and the only other thing in terms of analyzing the data, I'm looking at school data, and I don't want to just compare, like there's swings in schools. Is that something, like in terms of, to Michelle's point of analyzing data, why is one school at like a math in the 80s and one school is 69? I mean, if we're going to have an analysis of the data, there has to be a story behind that as well.
Right, and so that's what you'll find too in that continuous improvement plan. That's where each building will highlight their spring data and then what they worked on.
But if we're releasing
based on their
this to the
scores.
community, isn't there high bullet points that we could put in there to supplement. I mean, I'm not going to look through a 150-page. That's what this is for our community. So if someone's going to look and says, X elementary school is at 85% and elementary school Y is at 69%, why? I'm just saying that's what.
Well, that's what that continuous improvement plan report does, right? It provides each building's data with all of the information, and compared to like our MSTEP data and how they're doing with Fastbridge, it has their Fountas and Pinnell, and then each building has their bullet points. So like my other point is, do you want the slide deck to be 100 slides?
No, all I'm saying, there's got to be some one or two, like if someone's just going to look at this, they're going to say, well, there's something going on. Forget us, the community's not going to look at 100. There's got to be some high-level findings that.
Yeah, and I feel like the high-level analysis in that 100-page report that has each building's information. If you want it added to this, then I'm happy to make sure each building submits a report and we add a couple bullet points to each slide.
No, I mean, last year, this presentation was 36 slides, and there was just the two assessments that outlined the demographic by school that just wasn't in the presentation this year, and there was only 36 slides last year. So I think it's just, you know, for the sake of conversation, just being able to see where that growth is happening, and if we are providing resources. If that school is always underperforming, then are we giving that particular school the resources necessary to be successful? And so I think we need to make sure at the building level that we're supporting our kids where it's necessary.
The concern is this raises more questions than offers answers. That's the concern with the data as presented.
No, I would suggest that any additional feedback you have, send to Dr. Southward, and then she can send with me. And then for the fall, we can revise the slide deck to incorporate some of those ideas. Then also, for the July study session, maybe these are some of, the forward future planning is to have deeper dives in some of the study sessions around first identifying what is academic growth. What are our goals? What are we trying to accomplish? What data points are we going to use? All data points aren't equal. And what data points are we going to prioritize? And then how are we allocating our resources? Where are there additional needs? And how have we as a team allocated those resources? Then evaluating those outcomes and whether they're making the positive impact we want or not. And then reevaluating and reallocating if need be. I think that's probably part of the July study session, but any other feedback as you think about it, please give it to Dr. Southward, and she'll give it to me, and I'll share it out with the team.
Any other questions? Yes, Carrie.
So typically in the fall, like September, October, our state assessment results are in, and so we spend a lengthy amount of time going over our state assessment results with MSTEP, PSAT, and SAT. So that's typically what we do in the fall. And then required by law as well, but we do it because of part of continuous improvement, is we present all of our benchmark assessment data in February and June. One of the requests that we've had is buildings to have the opportunity to present their data to you and talk about what they're doing and what the results mean. And then that was changed. And so I guess my suggestion would be thinking about into next year, because I'm just giving you the data, but the building level can provide some of that additional information and detail that you're looking for about what they're working on. And maybe considering going back to having those building level presentations spread throughout the year so they have a chance and opportunity to share what they're working on, is also, and as well as highlight some of the, well, not just the work, but some of the success that they're having and then the challenges that they see, so that we can continue to work with them.
I think, well, just like when we're looking at this that's released to a community, I think overall, whether or not a building's going to present on their data, overall someone's going to look at this and say, this building is performing 17 points higher than this building. Why? And they're not going to go to the 98-page document. So I guess in our meeting in July, I guess we're going to have to spell out, if we could look at this, data's going to come in, what are we looking for off at a high level to present to the community? So to Siva's point, it doesn't create more questions.
I mean, are we going to have a candid conversation that allows or permits, not allowed, but provides space and opportunity for building level staff or principals to share information about what they're really missing in their space?
I don't have the
I mean,
history.
because how do we know that when they collectively come together, that the highlights that we're getting aren't the great highlights? How do we know what's really, if there really are things that are missing that they aren't just sharing?
So I can't really speak to missing. I'm not sure.
I mean, if you welcome conversations or feedback from the principals to give to us, I mean, I guess they share great information, but this data tells us that they have resources, but do they have adequate resources?
I would hope those conversations would have been shared also with central office all along, because there's an additional need. The way the format kind of was with the MyKit presentations when we originally started was each building presenting. Kind of like, here are some things that are going well, here are areas that we need to improve, and here's how we're going to try to tackle those areas to improve. And then coming back again and sharing those results.
Okay.
But the building administrators, they definitely would know if there are additional needs they have as far as resources, without a doubt.
An earlier point was made that we moved away from having building administrators report. Who drove that decision? I don't recall that being a board decision, right?
They presented.
They did present, but a comment was made a few minutes ago that we moved away from that structure. So what drove that decision?
Sure. The feedback given to me from the board after the first year was to consolidate it, because we had each individual building going at a time. And then that's what we've done since then. There's a new board since then, but it was to consolidate the presentations. My recommendation a couple of years ago was each month there would be a building presentation. If we had to combine like some of the smaller buildings like Bowers, Wing Lake, we could. And the feedback given to me by the board at the time was consolidate it, shrink it down.
That was 2 years ago.
Yeah, no.
The last 2 years we've done that.
And I agree. I recall that. And I like high level. I mean, but, high level with data, like you said, is like what I would have liked to have seen is, you may have noticed that, this is 13 points lower, this group's, and we kind of answered Michelle's questions a little bit. These are the reasons, like you have the data, and then you're looking at the data. Now you're analyzing the data and saying, these are the reasons why.
You need the story that goes with it.
Yeah, and there's no story here, in my opinion.
You got quantitative, but where is the qualitative data? Like, where is that conversation?
Do they have the story yet? Like, I don't know. Like, are they at the point that they can even?
It's in this 98-page document. I don't know. I mean,
well, I'm just,
some of the story.
I don't know if we're even at that point, because if I'm in the building, I may not know what I'm going to do yet to address the results of assessments that have just, or diagnostic results that have just taken place.
No, not the story as to the why. Like why this group is 10 points lower, why this building may be 15 points lower. There is a why or there isn't a why. There may be a why.
And if there's interventions being done over the last few years, maybe the administrators have an idea of what's worked well and what's not, and they can incorporate that in next year's plan, right? We're not expecting it's going to be a continuous straight line trend. There are going to be blips along the way, and that's okay. But it's good to get firsthand feedback from administrators on what's worked in their building and what hasn't, and what they can collectively share and implement across the district.
Yeah, we're spending tons of money on infrastructure. Are we also making sure we're spending the adequate dollars to support our teachers and administrators inside the classrooms? I just want to make sure that as we're moving forward, we know that there's a story that's told in that building year after year, and those administrators know those stories for those students. And sometimes in the years that I don't know about present time, but sometimes that ask after being told no doesn't become an ask anymore. And so I want to make sure that we're hearing it today. If our administrators, there's things that are necessary, that are needed. I'm hearing our district saying that our administrators and our staff are able to come and our administrators are able to come and have that candid conversation to make sure they have the adequate resources in their spaces to be successful for their students.
Absolutely. So again, I would suggest at the July 13th meeting, we have a consensus of 7 people to say, here's when we'd like those types of presentations and make sure it fits within the schedule. Here's what we kind of want them to look like, sound like, and then everyone walks away that day with an understanding of what the deliverables are, so there's no confusion and nothing else later on. But the MSTEP stuff will be in the fall. That's when it always is.
Yeah, and I think I have an example. It's just this one small example, but like when we're in our MyKit meetings and things like that, we're having conversations about why we're seeing some of the data that we're seeing, you know, and just in our most recent conversation, we were talking about early literacy skills with our kindergarten and first grade students and trying to understand that discrepancy. And so we were talking about the phonemic awareness tasks, because there's many, right, to understand, because that's all auditory, like rhyming, beginning sound, ending sound, it's what you hear auditorily, then trying to translate into phonics and reading those letters and those scribbles on a page, right? And trying to understand that. And so we're looking at our phonemic awareness resources to support our students, like because we're having conversation because we're seeing that in the data, but then also what kinds of training and support might be needed. And then actually talking with kindergarten teachers to understand what they're seeing. And then we're looking at other types of assessments that might help us with phonics and phonemic awareness through Teachers College that we might use that might give us better information. So what I'm seeing is that we're having those conversations and then trying to figure out next steps. And then my job is to sort of synthesize that information and put it into our MyKit plan. It's just an example of one of the things that we've talked about.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting the data. We appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome.
It's a lot of helpful information. Now, and I will say this, that the information and our students are doing, you know, phenomenal. So this is just a small sample that I really want to make sure that we still, you know, I'm still here.
Yeah, we have a lot of work to do.
Yeah, we do. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Board business, moving on to item number 13, request to approve transfer from center program funds to capital equipment fund, Wing Lake Playground. We have Karen Hildebrandt. Is there a motion?
I move to the Board of Education approve the transfer of funds in the amount not to exceed $250,000 from the Center Program Fund to the Capital Equipment Fund in order to fund playground equipment and design at Wing Lake Development Center.
There is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, can we call for a vote? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Vote passes 5-0. We are moving on to item number 13B, request to approve fiscal year 2022-23 final budget revisions. Is there a motion?
I move that the Board of Education adopt the final budget revisions for the fiscal year 2022-23 as detailed in the attachments and summarized below, with the general fund having revenue transfers in of $112,811,892, with transfers out of $111,257,846, for a net revenue in of $1.554 million. Special revenue funds with revenues and transfers in of $22,879,835, offset by expenditures and transfers out of $23,259,995, for a net deficit of $380,160.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been properly moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0. Motion passes. Moving on to item number 13C, request to approve the resolution for adoption of the fiscal year 2023-24 budget and the tax rates. Is there a motion?
In accordance with the Uniform Budget and Accounting Act, I move that the Board of Education adopt the attached resolution and related original budgets for the fiscal year 23-24 for the general fund and special revenue funds as required by law and summarized as follows. For the general fund, a revenue and transfers in of $110,279,690, offset by expenditures and transfers out for $110,311,971, for a net deficit of $32,281. For special revenue funds, revenues and transfers in of $24,036,993, offset by expenditures and transfers out of $23,685,056, for net revenue inflow of $351,937.
Support.
It's been moved and properly seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing no discussion, all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes 5-0. Item number 14, I move for adjournment.